This program deals with devil worship and satanic beliefs. It contains explicit scenes and descriptions of violent crimes and rituals.
Americans are asking, who attacked our country?
You have declared a subliminal jihad against the United States. Can you tell us why?
Everything pertaining to what's happening has never come to the surface. The world will never know the true facts of what occurred, my motives.
And night fell on a different world.
And Iblis is thinking, I should be getting this position, not Adam, and this guy is created from dirt.
And how does the army feel about you being head of the Temple of Set?
And the conspiracy theorists can say what they will, but
I want you to give me power over Adam, and I want you to give me soldiers and minions and all of these things.
The people have so much to gain and have such an ulterior motive for putting me in a position I'm in. We'll never let the true facts come above board to the world.
And I want you to be able to give me the ability to whisper into the hearts of mankind.
And who was the grotto leader? Don't remember his name. You don't remember the name of a person who involved you in murder?
Now these people are in very high positions, Jack.
Yes. Welcome back to Subliminal Jihad, episode 352. I'm your co-host, Dimitri.
I'm Khalid.
And today, we're coming to the YouTube stream with a tangled, dark, rabbit hole kind of a story that weirdly is one of, unlike many of our topics, seems to be something that is covered like mostly by YouTube streamers and video essayists more than maybe where we usually hang out more.
I think
X.
because it is something that has what we're discussing, the group that we're discussing has a presence on video platforms like TikTok and stuff like that, and on YouTube, right? They communicate a lot lately through long form videos. So that was actually how I first encountered them. I encountered one of their long kind of incredibly long 8-hour Conspiraslop videos featuring an AI George Washington warning us about the archons.
My fellow Americans, I have come back to, what was that called? This infamous
global crisis, is that what it's called?
I thought it was called something like Insight or something like that.
That might be it. There's a bunch of them, and they're all interminably long.
Literally 8 hours long. But we're talking about an interesting group. I guess
the Impact documentary.
Impact, that's what it's called. The Impact by the Earth Save Science Collaborative. Now, what could that be? It actually is sort of a front for the group we're going to talk about today. This group called AllatRa.
Is it pronounced AllatRa or AllatRa?
Well, that kind of gets into a little bit. There's a little hidden meaning embedded in the name, but most people refer to it as AllatRa. However, I've seen it spelled in earlier iterations as a kind of a capital A, lowercase a lot, and then capital Raw at the end of it. The Raw is not entirely coincidental, but most people, I think, for the purposes
nor is
of
the Allat, they both the meaning of both is explained in the book AllatRa, and also in the Sensei series, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
So I mean, either way, for ease of pronunciation, I'll go with how they usually say it in their kind of PR output as AllatRa, but we will come back to the interesting etymology of that. But this is where to even start with this group. They kind of purport. Some of you might have stumbled upon them online at various points, but they kind of present themselves as an international NGO, kind of group that is primarily focused on climate change issues. Okay. Yeah. There's a lot of those.
Climate change issue.
Very specific climate change issues, as we'll see.
Led by a leading, brilliant physicist who, needs to be heeded with an amazing resume.
Are you talking about their American spokesperson? This is where the quote unquote rabbit hole of a lot of these like YouTube videos kind of starts, and then it peels back different layers of the onion. But it's with this figure,
Dr. Egon Chalakian.
Dr.
Yes.
Egon Chalakian, who I guess people kind of started seeing pop up on various social media and YouTube. He's like in that Impact documentary, but also kind of like superimposed on, like his face is sort of superimposed onto George Washington and kind of blended with it. So it's kind of like him in costume as George Washington, like talking to you. Right. Yeah. Uh-huh. No, it's kind of specific. You can see it.
Yeah.
And like, I think what we're going to try to do, I think, today in classic SJ fashion is dive a little bit deeper than there have been some compelling video essays that I like watched last night. I think there was one in the last month that kind of really made the rounds and drew more people's attention to this. I forget what it was called. Like, the AllatRa YouTube Strangest Rabbit Hole by Void the Warlock. And there's been a few others, like maybe from a year ago. I think even, I hate to even say this, but the fact that streamer Destiny like went on a rant about this one day and totally schizoed out over this like Dr. Egon Chalakian guy, and is he AI or not? I guess that also drew some attention to them, though actually kind of makes sense, because like one of the very tangled things about this group is the extent to which they're often described as a pro-Putin cult. Surprise, right? They're a cult,
right?
But I think it's a little more murky and complex than like
the whole idea. The idea of that they're like a pro-Putin group is kind of based on, first of all, I wasn't able to find, like, it's one of their more obscure books that were put out under the name, again, like in terms of whether Egon Chalakian actually exists or some kind of AI persona, they definitely have like a history of using pseudonyms, because these books that are all these AllatRa books that kind of lay out the elaborate doctrine of this group, and all the terminology at incredible length over a 4-part insanely long series, which is just written in the form of conversations with a wise sensei, sensei, martial arts master, and his Russian or sort of pan-Slavic disciples, and there's also the book that's simply titled AllatRa, which is conversations between Anastasia, the sort of alleged author who may also not exist, Anastasia Novik. It's her conversations with Rigjan Japo, the sort of Shambhala guardian figure, famously illustrated by Nicholas Roerich. So
yes,
you see like a lot
there's
of
a
these
Roerich connection to this at some point. Yeah, and that Anna Novich or Novik is like the purported author of these AllatRa books, but people have unmasked her. Her real name is Alina Yablachina. And there's like there's some interest. She's a little bit murky, but it's her in partnership with this one guy who we'll get into, Ihor, from the Donbass region of Ukraine, originally a chiropractor, who, let me see, Ihor Danilov, is the sort of shadowy like male leader, and then this woman kind of I guess wrote all the books and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, this is actually a like highly theosophically inspired kind of mystical group fronting as an NGO, and is being able to kind of be invited into like official spaces. We often see this with like sus kind of fronts or like NGO groups that are like a little weird, that they'll often piggyback on these like UN conferences about like climate change, or the European Parliament events, or things of Israeli national security conferences. Among other things, and they'll
it's
kind
a
of
common thing. I mean, like we kind of talked about this in a recent Q&A where we were talking about the Lucis Trust, and like there is sort of a kind of inherent appeal of sort of NGO type things to the sort of new age mentality. Although in this case it is a little bit odd because they do have this kind of like very strong kind of a Kievan Rus type pan-Slavic identity that, and you know, you really, it's not a sort of pure, definitely there are like kind of theosophical influences, kind of these broader new age type influences, but you also do see like certain things that clearly have kind of a Russian character to him. Like for instance, the planet Phaeton, which you talked about in one of our previous episodes,
our Soviet parapsychology episode.
Yeah, very prominently part of this. The Soviet Union is like kind of has an interesting kind of historical role where we'll read maybe some parts from Sensei of Shambhala.
It's got, some people have pointed out that it seems some things have a kind of influence or at least an adjacency to kind of Duganist ideas about
I mean fair enough. In fact I almost feel like it's like again, this is like a cult, so who knows like what's going on really but behind the scenes. But I'd actually say that like in terms of what they actually put forward, it's less like rancid than Duganism, honestly. Less like, I don't
know. I mean, they both
all about like spiritual enlightenment. Like
they both might be chaos magicians to a bit, or Discordians, but in slightly different flavors. But this Dr. Egon Chalakian, that's where most of these like deep dive rabbit hole videos kind of start with him, and it's like, who is this guy that has all these long videos? And like, oh my god, if you start to zoom in on like his pictures and his videos, it starts to seem like this guy is like AI generated and he doesn't exist, but he's giving these like 3-hour lectures on multiple different like dummy botted YouTube channels where he barely ever like moves his body or like his hands and just like talks in a room for 3 hours. And then, if you zoom in on the background where there's like, classic like photos of him shaking hands with famous people kind of thing, like you zoom in and like the people have no faces and like the books have no names on them, and like, it's just, oh my god, like what is this? This is fake AI. Oh my god. Of course, like now this is a thing we have to deal with constantly. But then, when
did he first appear in like the material? Does anybody know? Because like it is still like pretty sophisticated AI that makes me like question it would be pretty sophisticated AI. And also like,
that's a good point.
If you were going to create an AI persona, why would you create Egon Chalakian? Like, why would that be like the guy, like this sort of like weird looking bald man named Egon?
Well, I mean, some people kind of looked into that. If I recall, like looking over, I guess his main, the Earth Save Science Collective, it looks like maybe going back like 4 years or 5 years, which would kind of line up with like early. That's still kind of early AI. I feel it's only maybe the last like 2 years.
Something that's this stable,
Unless you had a
Will
private
Smith eating spaghetti.
That was like 2022, I think. Maybe.
So this would be like a totally created like AI, like again.
Well, here's the thing, though. Here's the thing that people that were like looking into this, and then somebody dug up a Zoom video that was on YouTube from 2020 that had like 20 different people in it, and he's in the video. Like he actually, I mean, on the one, I think what it is people looked at a lot of still photos he had uploaded maybe on like his website or on LinkedIn or something. His LinkedIn has like a crazy resume of like, he's a national security expert, he's a nuclear engineer,
right.
Like he served under Richard Nixon and
yeah.
George Bush, and he's an advisor to the national security state and blah blah blah. And then like has all these kind of unbelievable like educational credits and stuff. I think maybe what if I had to guess, maybe what would have happened is like it is perhaps the case that like the videos themselves are not AI generated, but the photos were perhaps generated as a way to kind of Photoshop him like meeting with famous people,
Yeah,
and that there was evidence that some of the photos were just like old school, like photoshopped from other photos online.
If that's
now,
the case,
oh yeah, but okay, so
and it's also easy to like get a picture with like some people. It's not like he was, with presidents,
right. But yeah, I don't think he was with presidents, but he, there's some other like kind of famous people. But anyways, there is this video from him like from a different angle, and he's in honestly kind of like a messy room. This is during COVID, and he's like chatting, and he seems very much like he is a real person, and he is, in fact, he is registered as an official lobbyist on behalf of AllatRa in the last couple of years, and he's appeared at certain conferences of theirs, so he is a real person. The only other thing I'd throw out there for people that are still like, no, those videos are AI and sus, is like maybe they made AI videos based on his image and like, maybe.
I'm going to go out there and say that, like, people on the internet, like, being like, look at the hands. Remember Netanyahu's dead?
Yeah.
Remember Netanyahu's hands? Like they, and, like, everyone was, like, so sure of that. Like, these people on the internet, this is the SJ difference, okay? We're not going to, like, go down the rabbit hole being like, the hands! Like, it's...
Yeah.
Like, it's maybe, like, a video artifact or something. I don't know. I'm sorry.
I
think that, like, people... Because that is... So, like, exciting and crazy, like, oh, they made a totally fake AI guy, but, like, he is a lawyer, he does have, like, legal briefs, like, mentioning him that, like, pre-exist.
I saw one video that he was, like, he's been sued a number of times for fraud, I think.
Yeah.
I didn't get to see the hard evidence. As far back as, like, he was sued by the SEC in the 70s, so, like, he has, an actual paper trail as somebody who's engaged in kind of false activity. He really is, it's like the AI thing is a little bit, it comes up in other contexts with AllatRa, but in terms of this guy's, like, identity, the most important thing is, like, he's somebody that misrepresents himself and pretends to be like an insider, a highly credentialed expert, and he seems kind of like a con man that for whatever reason has been roped into working as like a public spokesman for this group, AllatRa, and goes out and kind of like publishes videos that kind of that contain their very specific ideology, though it's kind of like it's definitely a little bit occulted on a lot of their public-facing content, but it gets into like crazy apocalyptic conspiraslop ideas when you really drill down.
For something more recent, like the Impact video, he's in that so much that I'm like, AI is good enough now that like maybe he was like too lazy. Like that's reasonable to say, I guess, that maybe he was too lazy and he just decided to make an AI video of himself, like, but I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't watch like it was 8 hours, so I only watched a little bit of it. But I actually think that the narrator voice in like a good chunk of it, like in the first hour that I watched after the intro, is just like an AI voice reading a script over like various images and stuff like that. The beginning it does look like they rendered an AI George Washington that kind of looks like Chalakian.
Very, very. I don't necessarily see the resemblance with him, but
maybe not. But either way, it's like I guess it's not that different from Glenn Beck interviewing George Washington on his podcast.
Was kind of like that George Washington too.
And the voice seems like AI generated, and it's a whole speech. So actually, I think he probably pops up in that 8 hour video. I'm sure at some point, but so much of it is like kind of blatantly AI generated, and then there's also the fact of like many high control groups, they are very defensive and they can be litigious, and like there's a phenomenon where even Reddit threads that are kind of talking about like what's up with this group, they seem sus, you get like quote unquote followers, like accounts, like sliding in quite regularly. Like it's like they're monitoring this in some kind of automated way and sliding in and acting like very odd and kind of trying to like defend the ideology of AllatRa, or saying it's not a cult, or going onto one of their favorite tangents, which Chalakian does all the time, which is talk about the sinister designs of the anti-cult movements around the world, which are the most dangerous threat to humanity, is anti-cult movements.
No, I remember that coming up in the Impact documentary about how like everything is all about like the anti-cult movement and how evil they are. Yeah, like they are the ultimate foot soldiers. That seems to be a consistent thing about AllatRa. No, you're right. I went through the Impact documentary again, and he doesn't really show up himself for a long period of time. You do see AI George Washington sitting down, but only for brief periods of time. Yeah. Whereas and there's a distinct difference between that AI George Washington and like the videos you see of Egon Jalakian, which seem to be
right. No,
like,
I believe that he's a real flesh and blood human that has that name. What he has done his whole life and what he's really about. That's a much more of a question mark, except to know that I think we can confidently conclude that he's lying about his resume and his qualifications.
Yeah, I would say so as well. Yes.
Yeah, he's he claims to be a CERN scientist, like, just kind of every conspiracy slop adjacent thing. Though I should note that they have people that come around and go on their like AllatRa TV kind of channel and do social media interviews with them and things like that, who do have legitimate like national security state backgrounds, like ex-CIA kind of officers and other kind of politically connected people. I think one thing that I kind of stumbled on like just yesterday, which kind of spurred us to do this episode, is I hadn't realized this, but one of the favorite, bête noirs of subliminal jihad, of course, was always going to pop up into this story. Mr. Brock Pierce did a video interview with AllatRa TV at, I think, the beginning of this year, in like January or February 2026. And, we haven't...
You mean with AllatRa TV?
AllatRa TV. Yeah. And you can find it on YouTube. It's uploaded by one of their like dummy channels called like Peacemaker, so it's not like officially, but the video it's one of the women, one of the, I think Ukrainian women that runs like the social media or the other kind of spin-off group of AllatRa, which is the Creative Society. This is another organization that's very vague and is kind of serves as like a front or like a feeder organization to sort of pull people into the AllatRa network. And Brock Pierce, like I guess maybe we haven't seen much of him, since the Epstein files came out, and there were some new revelations about him. Actually, a lot of more specific revelations about his and Epstein's relationship. Remember those emails we read about Brock going to Ukraine in like 2012 and 2013 and talking about all the sending like 40 photos of some girl back to Epstein and, all kinds of really, really shady shit. And, this is just like one-shotted Brock Pierce like platitudes that have like extremely sinister undertones like for a half hour. Like it's honestly hard to pay attention to because it's just like this is just such like weird grifter slop. Like he says things like, the future's either going to happen to you or happen with you. It all comes down to love. That's it. Love is the game. And whatever. And it's like, but like, I imagine like Mark Holland's rector, like with a gun saying that to you, that there's, the future's either going to happen to you or with you, and then he's talking about AI and how all our jobs are going to get destroyed, but it's going to be beautiful. And we're going to have universal basic income and there's going to be a evolutionary transformation. And the host is like, Brock, you are such a beautiful ambassador for peace and love and understanding. And he's like, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, but that's not going to happen if the Mariana Trench shoots volcanic ash
in 2036,
like the entire planet. Yeah.
Well, spoiler alert.
Earth into a Mars-like environment.
That is kind of the Lord Xenu reveal of all of this, is that's what they actually believe is that's their thing that they're concerned with climate change, is that it's actually not caused primarily by human activity, but it's caused by the ocean being unable to cool down the Earth's mantle, which is going to cause the Mariana Trench to erupt in a huge volcanic explosion, and then is going to destroy the magnetosphere and like ruin the climate and like kill everybody in 2036.
Yeah. So we have 10 years to stop it. So it seems like interviewing Brock Pierce is like a big waste of time.
You would think, unless you look at, Brock Pierce as a kind of strange deep state actor, that a connector, if you will, who is, I don't know, like connected with all these, connected with Steve Bannon, connected with Teal.
I was thinking a good comparison to this group is actually the Mujahideen Khalq, the MEK, right? Which is like similar because like, yeah, they are able to kind of leverage their relationship with, or their kind of nebulous connection with like an area that the US is like a huge geopolitical interest in to kind of like hook in people who like, you know, and they are truly like a cult, right? And, you know, or they have a sort of high control group cult aspects, right? And they have like you know, an ideology that generally, like, you know, there kind of has been a mutual influence, right? I feel like the MEK has like kind of changed its rhetoric substantially, you know, during its kind of existence in the United States, right? But also like, you know, there are people who like, you know, like Rudy Giuliani, who are like, you know, big boosters of the MEK, like to take over, you know, and they have become like lobbyists, basically. You know, they originated literally as like mujahideen, right? And
weren't they Marxist for a while?
U.S.-based lobbyists.
Weren't they also Marxists to like some degree?
They might have had.
And I think in like the 70s and the 80s or whatever. But then they they moved away from all of that.
They were originally Yeah.
Now they're hanging out with. They were hanging out with John McCain and like Rudy Giuliani doing fundraisers and stuff. And they also kind of have don't they have like a weird cult? They have a culty vibe, right?
Yeah. Like what's her name? Maryam Rajavi. Is kind of like this, you know, kind of the cult has a sort of cult leader, you know, vibe. You know, it's a very sort of high control group, and like they have like this great, just all, you know, they can't quite suppress it, even though they're obviously trying to like manage their image to appeal to, you know, like you know, American imperialism. They can't quite suppress that aspect of like the insane reverence for Maryam Rajavi. Although you could say that there's similar aspects to you know, the sort of reference for Reza Pahlavi, but at the same time, like it's kind of different.
Yeah, there's a certain diaspora tendency to kind of like do that to some extent, but I think when you add a kind of actual cult dynamic, an organizational thing, it really goes off the rails.
There is that aspect, I think, with the MEK in a way there isn't with Pahlavi or with, you know, other political figures like that. But when you can see the same thing of like going from being like a resistance group in an Iranian context to being, or you know, like an enemy to the Islamic Republic, or you know, sort of an opposition to them, to being like U.S. based lobbyists, right? And like any kind of eccentricities they have, including like, you know, ideological eccentricities, can be smoothed out because that kind of leverage or cultivating possible like opposition factions or groups that one can control, right, or that one can have a relationship to. In, you know, that environment, and that have some kind of like power over people, or able to exercise some kind of power over people, right? Is I think considered to be useful.
Definitely. Yeah. I'm just looking through some of the more. There's been some investigative journalism in Europe against this group. Of course, this is sinister anti-cult, you know, coordinated activity.
Right, yeah.
That's like evil, blah, 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 according to them. But because this group has spread, it started in Ukraine. Let me actually just bring up maybe their Wikipedia to give everybody a very basic overview. Let me see here. AllatRa, yes. And there's like a number of things about them that just make me go like, interesting. And you know, I think we'll get into the murkiness a little bit down the road, but like one thing that does kind of like irk me a little bit is like the type of people. That's why when I brought up earlier, like Destiny jumped all over this. Like it's not exactly surprising because isn't he like a huge like FAFO, like NATO pro-Ukraine, like NATO liberal?
So I remember him mostly from being like, you know, the Israel defender, like
right,
in the aftermath of October 7th.
But I think before that, and this was less controversial, he was a big, super like pro-Ukraine kind of, as a lot of bread tubers were.
To be honest, like my knowledge of him like only began like after October 7th.
Right. Yeah. But, generally, but I think a lot of that sphere on like the kind of YouTube space, and then also these, counter disinformation, like researchers like Dave Troy, for example, has been very all over this story, which I appreciate. However, like he and others like him tend to do the Dave Troy thing where it's like, it's Putler. It's 100% Putler confirmed, like from the jump. Like it's just everything's operating on the assumption that Russia is like the puppet master behind all kinds of different deep state networks and activities and things like that. And I think that it's like it's a blind spot. It's a heuristical
Dave Troy
blind
definitely
spot.
has that framework. And like I understand why, like I understand why one would be suspicious of this group, obviously, and like I understand why both Ukraine and Russia would both consider them to be a possible threat. And I see why, like, if you're trusting Ukrainian sources, they're obviously going to say that this is working for like their enemy who they're currently at war with, right? You know, but like really, I think what that is like expressing is just a general feeling of being sussed out and distrustful of this group, right? And I think it's interesting actually that like both Ukraine and Russia like would, maybe you'll give the details about this maybe in what you're about to read. Both Ukraine and Russia, found this group to be one that they didn't want to host in their society, but it has found a home in the United States, which I think kind of speaks to like that tendency that I was just talking about, like the willingness of the United States to kind of cultivate these cults, to cultivate these like new religious movements as instruments of its foreign policy or of soft power.
Absolutely. And that's like that's where I feel like that point is not appreciated by a lot of these fearless disinformatia, like counter disinformatia researchers, is they never acknowledge like the deep interest and investment of the United States intelligence services and various soft power apparatuses in doing just that, what you said, like protecting these overseas cults and kind of using them as instruments for various soft power subversive objectives in, say, like the collapsing Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, which like they, I think even before the Soviet Union collapsed, remember we've referenced a lot like the articles in the early 80s in Soviet newspapers about the Hare Krishnas being a CIA mind control cult that and in fact there's kind of some Hare Krishna stuff happening in here tangentially a little bit, but there was this explosion of new religious movements in the former Soviet Union, Ukraine, Russia, all over the place in the 1990s. And you kind of have to be naive to think that the United States would just never have any interest in, especially a group like this, which started in Ukraine but moved to Atlanta, Georgia, I think in like 2018. Still has operations both in Ukraine and Russia. So it can, I'm willing to admit that it's murky, and perhaps there's a little bit of like both sides playing with this, kind of group or factions within both. But I do think that kind of stopping it off at they're a pro-Putin cult, it's like that's like way too simplistic for
if you look into
like
it,
what
like,
this actually is,
the idea that they're a pro-Putin cult. First of all, I read like a substantial amount of these sensei books and also the AllatRa book, and like in terms of their like philosophy of government, like I paid particular attention to like what their political ideology was to try to like investigate, like, because the way that it's like sort of represented in a lot of the sort of secondary literature and the journalism about this is that like it's obvious, like that they are acolytes of Putin.
They worship the Soviet Union and love Putin.
They do have a certain reverence for the Soviet Union. However, like the idea that like it seems to be based on this idea that there's this one book called Crossroads, that obviously it's translated from Russian, but that in which there's a figure called Nomo who is going to like unite the Slavic world, and there's the idea that like this corresponds like obviously to Putin, but I don't really like think that this is like necessary. I feel like that is kind of, obviously people like Dave Troy. Imagine how much people in Ukraine, like if someone like Dave Troy has that kind of, like everything's Putin sort of framework, imagine how much like the, Ukrainian security services and the Ukrainian, like the SBU, imagine how much they are like seeing Putin behind every like bit of susness,
I'm
like,
sure.
They're not going to take chances. They're like, this sounds like Putinite to me, And then of course that, and like, the media obviously like isn't really, it's not really a free press there. So they're like,
no, in neither country right now. Like you could be charged with like aiding the enemy, basically
totally,
and shut down. And they both kind of have been in Russia and Ukraine.
And like just in terms of the journalists who report on this, like it's for in Ukraine, right? And like that's going to be the framework that a lot of these like Western journalists or like para investigators or whatever, influencers, whatever, like they are going to adopt usually.
Or for that matter, Czechia, Slovakia, Slovenia, or a couple of the countries where they've done investigative reporting on the group, and because they have connections in those countries as well, because there is, like you said, a pan-Slavic kind of vibe going on, and they spend a lot of time translating their works into like other Slavic languages to kind of get a foothold there and set up all these little like school event activities, like let me see.
Yeah. And in terms of like the sort of history of this type of thing, those who haven't heard it should, it might seem like a tangential or unrelated topic, but the episode we did on the Unbinding is, we go a lot into this and like the history of it and like the sort of the post-Soviet context and the developments of these New Age movements in the Ukraine. In Ukraine. But
I swear to God, if you say Kiev, I swear to God, no, I'm just kidding. You can say however you want. But let me see. This is actually.
Oh, is Kiev the like the sort of right pronunciation, the way that we're supposed to pronounce it?
I think in Ukrainian it's more like Kiev, and then Kiev is more like Russian. And so,
really?
We were before 2022. Kiev was like the normal way.
It's like kind of different.
KYIV is the Ukrainian, and KIE. I mean, it's transliterated, but like KIEV is.
It's weird that like the different transliterations have like different politics when like that's not even the script that either use. But
right. It's the classic. Like I know they are technically like different languages, but they are quite close. And Zelensky used to speak Russian, I think, before the war.
Well, I imagine it's transliterated the same way. There's no in both Ukrainian and Russian, unless
I guess does
Ukrainian use the Latin
back,
alphabet
the
now?
back. No. They use Cyrillic. But like the backwards like N character, which is like E, like it's kind of an I,
so
and then there's like an E sound. It's more like eh, like Kiev instead of Kiev. Anyways, So let me see. There were a few good actually articles that kind of break down a little bit what they're about. And let's see. This one is from Ostro, a Croatian website, but it was like an international group of journalists from a few different countries coming together to write this in October 2024. So I think this was before they were kind of raided and banned or whatever from Ukraine and Russia. But this is called Climate Disinformation Peddlers Target the Vatican and U.S. Congress. And let's see. We'll go down here. Actually, there was a raid, I think, actually, before this, because there's a picture from it here. They say, a movement originating in Ukraine has been spreading globally to systematically deliver climate disinformation under the guise of climate change awareness. Although its main premise, the world ending in 2036, may seem fringe, its proponents recently secured an audience with Pope Francis and engaged a registered lobbyist, that's our boy, Chalakian, to work on their behalf in the U.S. This September, a local dance school for kids in Brezno, a small town in central Slovakia, held an open house for the public. Children were given balloons with the school's logos before the juniors' performances. A lone balloon in the reception area stood out. Its logo consisted of a figure 8 inside a triangle placed in a circle. Oh my God. For those intrigued, business cards of the same logo were placed above the nearby shoe cabinet. The logo belongs to Creative Society, a global activist project of the AllatRa movement. They do the kind of a capital R version of spelling it here, which denies that human activity is the primary cause of global warming. Last year, the Slovak Interior Ministry warned about Creative Society on its Facebook page and advised citizens to pay maximum attention if they come across it. Quote, remember this logo and avoid it. We are tracking the impact of a hybrid threat that shows the signs of a cult, they warned. Organizations whose activities are based on manipulative techniques, the dissemination of conspiracy theories, and disinformation present a risk to Slovak society, a spokesman for the Interior Ministry told us in an interview in September. Yet, the dance school, led by a Creative Society volunteer, Lenka Špiriakova, embedded the project's logo and one of its apocalyptic videos on its website. At the open house event, she spoke about the importance of teaching children moral values and then introduced a song performance. The lyrics, written by another volunteer, urged, quote, a world where hunger and war do not exist, a world that knows no thirst, a world where everyone moves forward, a world where no one looks back. Creative Society believes the world will end in 12 years, and only its volunteers can save it and remake it into one without wars and hunger. ICJK emailed Špiriakova detailed questions about whether it was appropriate to use the logo, flagged by Slovak authorities as a hybrid threat, in areas where children were present, and to teach them a song that apparently supports the tenets of Creative Society. She did not respond. AllatRa's leadership claimed in an official filing in the U.S. that the movement is a, quote, membership association that engages in geophysical analysis of the impact of climate change upon the Earth. Actually, it is engaged in active promotion and dissemination of climate disinformation around the world. The project promises its members millions of dollars in the future, but doesn't seem to have viable financial backing, despite at least 21 connected companies that currently push its agenda around the world. Some of these companies, in countries like Moldova, Bulgaria, and the Czech Republic, have reported zero income or never filed financial reports. Regardless of its denial of human-centric climate change and its curious financial promises, AllatRa scored a papal audience this year. It also paid a lobbyist to convince the U.S. Congress that it is not a cult, following Russian and Ukrainian authorities' denouncements of the movement as a religious cult in 2023. The lobbyist, Alan Egon Chalakian, is presented in Creative Society materials as a, quote, CERN scientist, but CERN press office told Ostro they have never heard of him. On his LinkedIn profile, he also goes by former White House lobbyist, but the official register shows he had never been registered as a lobbyist in the U.S. prior to this year. The White House did not respond to a request for comment. Now, this part, healing the world. AllatRa was established in July 2014 in Ukraine by Lagoda, a personal development center, and the AllatRa Publishing House. Initially, its main activity was to promote a book series by one Anastasia Novik. The books promised readers, quote, unique scientific evidence of the existence of the soul and exclusive information about self-knowledge and secrets hidden from society. But Fire Hose of Falsehood, I think it's like an anti-disinformatia NGO, Fire Hose of Falsehood partners found no evidence that Novik actually exists, while the copyright for several of her books is actually owned by Halina Yablachkina, the founder of AllatRa Publishing House. AllatRa also established a namesake online TV outlet, as well as companies or associations in several countries, including Russia, Cyprus, Belarus, the Czech Republic, Moldova, Bulgaria, Slovakia, and the U.S. Its website states the head office is in Atlanta, Georgia. Creative Society was born in 2019 at AllatRa's online conference titled Society, The Last Chance. At a later summit in Prague, the president of Creative Society USA, Olga Schmidt, described it as a volunteer-based, international, independent, non-political, and non-religious project that draws attention to the climate crisis, explores causes, and finds solutions. Chalakian, who also spoke at the Prague summit, stated that their mission was twofold: protection of democracy, and getting information out about volcanoes and so forth and climate change.
And so forth, yes.
Well, Creative Society's website claims that it works with volunteers from more than 180 countries and that its online conferences have been translated into over 150 languages. It states that the project is entirely funded by volunteers and has no, quote, bank accounts, finance, or property, does not accumulate funds, and does not make any profit. The project promises its members that in the future, every person will have as a birthright a monthly universal basic income, free housing, free healthcare, and education worldwide, cancellation of all debts and loans, and the abolition of individual taxes. Okay. Last year at the project's international online forum, Schmidt had promised each volunteer between $1 and $5 million as a reward for their engagement. She didn't respond to reporters' questions. According to Ihor Danilov, who was considered the movement's guru by some academic researchers, the goal is to, quote, build a creative society free from the system of consumerist mindsets. That's another thing they harp on. It's like, this consumerism is evil. Yeah. Like, yeah, it's like, okay, fair enough, but like, you're sus. Anyways, this transition to a, quote, creative society will happen in 3 stages over 5 to 6 years. First, volunteers will be encouraged to spread the findings of creative society as widely as possible. This will be followed by the formation of political parties with a shared ideology, coordinated by AllatRa. Finally, humanity will, quote, adopt a creative model of development as the only acceptable and crucial something for the survival of humankind through a global referendum to rapidly and peacefully advance to a new stage of evolutionary development. Neither Danilov nor Creative Society replied to requests for comment. Here we go. While Creative Society does not deny human effects on climate change, it argues that the most severe consequence of human activity is the rising ocean temperatures, which are now so high that they can no longer cool the Earth's core. This, they say, will lead to increased seismic activity that will rupture the Mariana Trench in the Pacific Ocean, causing billions of cubic meters of water to come into contact with magma, followed by a massive explosion, loss of atmosphere, oceans, and the magnetic field.
What has made the oceans hot, though? Isn't that is that not anthropogenic and they just happen to be getting
it seems
hotter?
Odd to me that
It seems like they're related.
Wouldn't climate change make the oceans more warm?
Yeah, it seems like if the oceans are warming as the result of human activity, then, that's obviously not going to cause like magma to erupt from the Mariana Trench and turn the Earth into a Mars-like environment. But if that were to happen, then it would still be, unless there's some other explanation like that, but that doesn't address the problem.
Yeah, I don't often see the explanation like kind of laid out as to like what is making the oceans hotter and what about it is different from the theories about man-made climate change. Because you'd think almost like, okay, what do you propose we do if like the oceans are heating up? Like besides generally fight climate change, like dump ice cubes in the ocean? Like I don't know, like what?
There doesn't seem to be any real plan. Like all of the solutions they come up with are social. So it almost seems like, well, there is a certain kind of like spiritual dimension to like all problems in at least the doctrine laid out in the books. So maybe, once we reach like a higher stage of consciousness as like a species, then we can, then this won't happen somehow, or we can like transcend it. But I don't really know what exactly is supposed to be causing it.
Well, They did ask a few serious scientists, about these theories. And I guess one, Howard Diamond, who is a climate science program manager at the NOAA, at the Air Resources Laboratory in America, told them, quote, there is absolutely no connection between seismic activity and climate change. I guess he said, the oceans are warming as a result of climate change, but the idea that waters of 1 degree Celsius can cool the Earth's mantle, which has temperatures in the range of 3,700 Celsius, is ridiculous, Diamond said. He's never heard of the Mariana Trench rupture theory. Quote, the oceans do not interact with the mantle as described by these folks, whomever they are. The Geological Institute of Slovenia pointed out to AllatRa that theories about seismic events resulting in the loss of atmosphere or stopping of the Earth's rotation, quote, are meaningless. Creative Society appears to spread its propaganda via some volunteers and is very active on social media. Several of its online claims and those of its volunteers have been found false by fact-checking organizations. In total, Fire Hose of Falsehoods partners identified 275 TikTok accounts across 41 countries that disseminate Creative Society content. Together, they published over 83,000 videos that were viewed almost 2 billion times. Context.ro developed an AI-based tool to detect disinformation in videos posted by 227 connected accounts in Russian, English, Slovak, Hungarian, and other languages. The tool analyzed more than 54,000 video posts by AllatRa, Creative Society, and connected accounts. Almost a third contained disinformation. Czech sociologist Wojtek Pecka, who focuses on climate disinformation, told the Czech Center for Investigative Journalism that the way Creative Society talks about the climate is specific. Pecka said most Czech climate disinfo tends to downplay the risk of a climate crisis, while Creative Society is alarmist in its rhetoric. Its strategy inspires legitimate anxiety about climate change, but they push that fear into, quote, an immediate existential hysteria while diverting attention to entirely imaginary solutions. The project told BBC in 2022 they're a platform for all ideas to be expressed.
There's something cynical about it, I think, in that, you see this a lot with these type of organizations where like the sort of alarm about like, but I feel like they know that like the prophecy is going to fail, like they know that that's not going to happen, but it creates this kind of pretext for like suspending all like, reason, right? And all like kind of, concern with anything other than like the one group that like knows the answer, right?
Yeah, that we only have 10 years,
Exactly.
It's so terrifying. And
I
do.
That enables you to just kind of like sit and contemplate, I
mean, sometimes I do wonder, since this did come out of like the mid 2010s, when that, especially near the late 2010s, like it was a very hot NGO thing to be like a very loud and in some cases a little rhetorically alarmist, like climate change activist. Which, I mean, I think it is an alarming development, but I think there's also, we've talked about it before, there was a certain like very global north kind of vibe to the kind of, the NGO foundations that were like, founded by traditionally wealthy, philanthropic organizations and stuff like that. That I do feel like maybe in that period that like, there was a kind of doomerism sometimes in the way that, and I still see it today on like social media and stuff, the way some people talk about it, like the way of like people that get really zeroed in on the climate issue get like really black-pilled about it because there are no political solutions on the horizon that seem like, like it's kind of like, oh, we're not going to really stop it at this point. Like it's just going to happen to us in the next, like, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 years. Or something like that, and we don't know exactly how bad it's going to get, but it's going to be like bad and highly disruptive. But like, there's a kind of like, we're all going to die, like it's all over, like blah blah blah. That sometimes I feel like, okay, like that's maybe not the most helpful, just to like doomer out over it, getting like super depressed and like politically demobilized and think there's like no point, the human race is doomed.
I think that the idea is to like create like political mobilization and political will, like for some people who, but I think that the sort of there is like a sort of idea of climate change that I think some people have that has kind of been created by that, which I do think maybe is a little bit demobilizing, because it does kind of have the sort of quality almost of this kind of theory where like it's going to like cause the earth to become uninhabitable, and there's less, because I think that sort of notion, I mean, I feel like I'm always mentioning this movie and how much I hated it, but like don't look up.
Yeah, exactly.
That type of thing of like, oh, this is like an apocalyptic situation, right? I think that is in some way maybe more mobilizing than the reality, because everyone, you know, in the United States and in some cases around the world, everyone is a temporarily embarrassed millionaire, right?
Yeah.
No one ever imagines them, because to say like, oh, you know, they're like, we're going to all be victims of climate change, right? And the most powerful are going to like use this to exacerbate the sort of tensions in society, to exacerbate, you know, the difference between the haves and the have-nots, and to, you know, cement their control over us and to immiserate, you know, people further, right? Like that this is going to become like an instrument of their exercise of power, like that everyone's going to imagine that they're going to somehow be like included by their benevolent rulers, you know, for whatever. That's
they're
like
going to get to be in the
people,
pod in the bubble city,
exactly.
in the biodome.
So I understand, and or they are excited because they imagine like, you know, their enemies, people who they hate, you know, suffering, and that gives them a thrill. So I think that is a problem. So I understand the sort of temptation to the apocalypticism, but I think that also does sort of attend itself to kind of like a demobilization or defeatism, or an idea that there's nothing that can be done to address the problem because the problem is cosmic. But in terms of whether I mean, I guess it's cosmic either way, but you know what I mean. It's like, inconceivable, like human extinction, right? It's literally possible, like, but you know, I think that in terms of the question of whether like this is something that is like tailored to like a, you know, the NGO kind of complex, I like maybe in some extent, but also I feel like this is a theme that runs through like the earlier books, that the Novak books. For instance, like you know, this is like just from the prologue to there's this one part that has to do with earthquakes. So again, this is a little bit into the weeds. Like there's so much groundwork laid. This is part 4 of Sensei of Shambhala, but you know, you could kind of see it here. At first glance, this is a Sensei. I'll actually read a little bit. So Sensei's talking about the importance of meditation. Though at first glance, this meditation may seem too simple or kind of naive, as Ruslan says, that's one of his disciples, use your imagination, that's all. But it is far from being simple, because apart from the influence of this powerful formula, a person also involves the power of his thought. And the power of the thought serves as a stimulus to realize the program defined by an individual. Results of this program are later reflected both in his physical and spiritual health. As the majority of people are constantly tuned to the wave of their animal nature, a large quantity of their both psychological and physical problems are, first of all, the result of their negative thoughts. This meditation is good not only for those people who want to establish an internal order, but also for those who already suffer from different illnesses, because almost 80% of the illness depends on the mind. The more a person thinks about the illness, the more he suffers from it. That's right, agreed our psychotherapist. Sometimes it happens that a person imagines his disease so well that he cannot get rid of it just because he routed in himself the thought that exactly in his case, this illness is incurable. At this point, Sensei, I absolutely agree with you. For people who experience problems with their nerves, this meditation will indeed be a much better cure than all the modern pills altogether, because drug therapy is incapable of curing human thought. Drug therapy is good only as an emergency for the body. He made a short pause and continued, indeed, human brain still remains quite a mysterious substance and is far from being explored. There's a little bit of, translation-y writing it here. And with a smile, he added, it's amazing that even in the very ancient times, people, in certain questions, knew a little bit more than present-day mankind. And can you not even imagine, and you cannot even imagine how significant in reality was this a little bit, Sensei specified. For a while, we kept silent, sitting around the table. It was Volodya who broke the silence. Well, it's an interesting meditation, an intriguing formula. By the way, I recalled about formulas. Ar-Rahman has also mentioned about some golden formula which transform with a certain sound a thought through isosmos to reality. This is the whole, supposedly it was used by the very Agapit. Is it true? Yes, it's true, Sensei confirmed. And did Agapit bring the Grail to the world? Yes, it was so indeed. The guys became more vivid and started to talk all together. Oh, and why did Ar-Rahman say the Grail is the power over the power? Sensei, tell us, yes, about the Grail, and what is that? Sensei looked at the arousing interest of the group to this issue and suggested, guys, let's talk about it a bit later. Everyone calmed down. Only Ruslan said gladly, "It means that not everything what Ahriman talked about was a lie." In reply, Sensei answered in a tired voice, "Ahriman possesses very serious knowledge indeed. But taking into account the peculiarities of his work, he gives this knowledge in the whole handful of tears. Only a pure, mature soul can distinguish where truth or lie is, where spiritual or material is. The others who are obsessed by this matter take everything on faith, and having eaten too much of tears, get into an Ahrimanic trap. But the true seekers, picking up even from his hands true grains, will be able to get saturated." Nevertheless, Ruslan began to share excitedly his remembrances and to jabber nonstop. "Besides, Ahriman told us about some formula which, according to him, is used to destroy megapolises."
Megalopolises? No.
No, it's
megapolis.
megapolises, I guess. But yeah, it's megalopolis. Basically the same thing. It seems to me that it sounds like id suum sulam, pronounced Ruslan with difficulties and added boastfully, "It seems to be an ancient one. The words are so difficult." Sensei grinned. "You say difficult? Turn this phrase vice versa, I guess backwards." While Ruslan was making every effort to do it, Nikolai Andreevich easily fulfilled this task. "Malus meus Dei?" It means in Latin, if I'm not wrong, "the devil is my god." That's not correct Latin, but anyway.
That's like bad me God.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just you just use the words like bad me and God. Yeah, it means like my bad of God. You aren't wrong, confirmed Sensei. "How come it is devil? And that's all?" Ruslan was utterly confused. The guy has a disappointed expression on his face that the other guys involuntarily began to laugh. "What have you expected, hemmed Yura?" Victor offered Ruslan in a friendly manner. "That's it, Ruslan boy. You should learn Latin if you decided to plunge into antiquity." "Nice deal," said Eugene, waving away flies again. "I'm not sure about this Latin, but the very moment Ahriman pronounced it, I was as if shaken from inside, as if the earthquake happened in reality." "And of course, he mentioned some real example," said Sensei, as if he knew Ahriman's trick long before. "Right. He told something about the Atlantic Ocean," recollected Eugene, frowning. "And some city." "New Orleans?" Yura interrupted him. "New Orleans!" And addressing already Sensei, he hurried to say his information. "And the main thing he explained in such details, how it would happen, how everything would be destroyed there." "He spoke about Japan, too," recollected Volodya. "I was surprised by the fact that he mentioned not only the magnitude of the earthquake on the Richter scale, but also the precise date when it would happen." "Well, I see," uttered Sensei. "What do you mean?" cautiously inquired Victor. "If Ahriman said so, then it has already happened." "In which sense?" Ruslan didn't get it. "How? It's the future." Sensei only sighed heavily, obviously because of such a naivety of the guy, and replied, "You see, those who possess the power perceive this world in a different way than ordinary people. What you felt the moment he was talking about it, it was the power put in this event. That is this event, though it is distanced by the future. It has already happened, especially if it concerned the natural element." "How can it be?" The guys were surprised. Sensei smiled sadly and said, "A thought is able to move planets, not just influence natural elements." And in a while he added, "Well, if he said it, it means the millions will get to know about that." So basically the mind can cause these horrible disasters to occur, as depicted in their vision from Ahriman, who's a bad guy, but has
who else was really obsessed with Ahriman? Was it like Rudolf Steiner? Or...
Yeah, he mentioned Ahriman as well. I mean, Ahriman features like in a lot of like New Age. It's weird because like sometimes they try to like redeem like Lucifer or even Satan, but like they need like they tend like it does kind of seem like ad hoc in a way. Like they need a bad guy, so then they resort to Ahriman.
A secret third bad guy.
Exactly.
They do like, I think do a little bit of that like process church thing where like God and Satan
sort of, when,
are but I think they do the process church thing where they kind of like worship God and Satan as like two very Gnostic kind of thing.
Kind of, like there's like a little bit of that. Like Satan does have like a more like a muted role. I remember there's one passage in one of the early Sensei books where kind of he talks about how like like really they don't have a full process church thing where they have like this true kind of not even Gnostic, but like this kind of like I guess maybe in some forms of Gnosticism you might see this, but like the this kind of
light and dark,
Luciferianism, like this idea
right.
where Satan is actually like maybe like some forms of
right.
Yeah,
It's
like
a little more
like
classic theosophical, like
it's more classic, and in fact I think it's even like less so than Theosophy. Like I think they kind of just see Satan in the same way that like a lot of religions see Satan, where like he's not as powerful as God. That's kind of like the point that the sensei hammers on a lot, right? But that Satan kind of works for God, that Satan is part of like God's creation. But I don't really know how Ar-Haman like factors into that or why he's important. But they actually do have. There's some weird theology. We could talk about that if you want.
Yeah. I mean, just reading here from their like the belief section of their Wikipedia, just to give a very brief overview, it says that the core sacred texts of AllatRa are a series of books authored by Galina Yablechkina under the pen name Anastasia Novik. Drawing from a variety of traditions, the beliefs of the group incorporate millenarianism, reincarnation, an abstract life force similar to Chi called Allat. Maybe you can speak more on that, and a divine pantheon of God and Satan. It also professes the presence of extraterrestrial life on Earth throughout history, particularly a benevolent race of ancient astronauts called Anunnaki, and a corresponding malevolent race called Apexians. The group has academically published claims that a, quote, septon field is responsible for periodic geological and climactic events. Books of AllatRa contain a theory about the coming end of the world, an apocalypse, and volcanic explosions. The text said the only way to save humanity is to unite under the creative society. A number of books, like we said, feature a character named Nomo, whose image was apparently inspired by Vladimir Putin. The books describe Nomo as a savior of the Slavic civilization who is fighting against the Western world. He was introduced as the future leader of a nation that will fight Archonts, who plan to create a world government headed by NATO and enslave humanity.
Yeah, the Archons are like the real, like, sort of recurring bad guy, like throughout, and they have their hands in a lot of things. But yeah, the issue of a lot comes up in, hold on, let me like this is really the book that kind of explains it. And a lot, for those who don't know, is like a pre-Islamic goddess. It's mentioned in the Quran.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't actually familiar with a lot.
It's like, I don't know what exactly the derivation of it is. I mean, people say it's just like the feminine form of Allah, right? And like but a lot in this is not really like, they do refer to that. In fact, they actually, like, as soon as I heard about AllatRa, I immediately thought of that. And
right, those are two loaded
actually, because like that's
right there.
It's a weird like goddess to dig up, because you don't really see like many like pagans like worshiping the pre-Islamic goddesses in general, like many neo-pagans.
True.
And especially like for a Ukrainian group. So I don't know what it is about this that they find appealing, but they definitely show like an interest in Islam and like kind of like a respect for Islam, but they don't really obviously it's not in accordance with Islam to worship a lot or portray a lot as like kind of a co-creator with God, which is basically what they do. But it's just one of the contradictions. Like, they could be more sort of as many theosophy influenced or sort of general New Age thinkers are. They could be more hostile to Islam than they are. They recognize Muhammad and talk a lot about Muhammad as like being a prophet. And
he's one of the ascended masters, right?
Yeah, he is. He's one of the ascended masters. He's not a bodhisattva like Jesus is, but he ascended to prophethood, or like to whatever, like holiness or whatever the status is, like on his own. So he's also like special, and he went to he ascended to heaven. They believe in the Isra and Miraj, and so they but for whatever reason they've also chosen the name Allat to represent this kind of like energy that is like a kind of like co-creative force. We can they even mention the satanic verses here. Yeah, let me actually bring
Salman
up
Rushdie's The Satanic Verses?
No, the actual incident that it's named after.
Oh, right.
Okay.
Yeah. Words of
story...
Satanic Suggestion, which Prophet Muhammad, by some accounts, mistook for divine revelation in an alleged incident. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, it's a story that like circulated, in the early years of Islam. That there were these like, verses that were, given by or urged into the prophet by Satan. Really,
kind of an
it's
AI
kind of
deepfake in a way, just like pretending to be Gabriel, but it's actually a satanic.
Exactly. Yeah, that was the idea, and like a lot of people have seized upon this and kind of imagined that this must be true because it's so embarrassing, but it really wasn't considered to be embarrassing at the time, and like most I think Western scholars now consider it to be a fabricated story, even though there are some who like cling to this. It was at one time like among Muslims like kind of widely believed, but it wasn't seen as like impugning the prophet's character. The idea of like prophetic perfection, or the idea that the prophet like he couldn't be influenced in this way or something came about later. But I think it's not a true story. It might be inspired by either just like a desire for like this kind of compelling story that like maybe illustrates certain things about like the prophet's life, or his the temptation to compromise with the Meccan pagans, because that's kind of how this was seen, that if he just acknowledged these three goddesses, right, which is what these verses were supposed to have done, then that would bring everybody to Islam. If he could just compromise the message for so people could still worship these three goddesses, then it would be fine. But so there might be, but I think also there's a verse in the Quran that talks about it says there's never been a prophet, but that Satan sends influences or tries to influence him, but God abrogates or sort of negates what Satan tries to suggest, right? And so I think that maybe that was extrapolated upon to create kind of the story to almost kind of explain that verse, right? Or almost to kind of justify it. But I'm not sure if what it meant was that their message is in some way the satanic verses are inserted into it. But and I think even if those verses were ever uttered, which there's no real reason to think that they were, but I feel like if they were in there, they could just have been misinterpreted. I feel like the interpretation does a lot, because it could also be kind of a specification, but anyway, whatever.
All right, yeah, let me. Okay, yeah,
So it's.
I do want to finish reading this article that I was reading from,
if you want,
that has the picture of the Ukrainian raid, where they seem to have they have meme posters of Putin. They have a bunch of these all these AllatRa books. They have, I guess, a MAGA hat. There's a very theosophical looking painting of some kind of ascended master bearded man with a halo around him. I'm not sure who that is referencing. There's also a lot of red Maltese crosses, both detached and also on white kind of robes, almost altar boy robes. I don't kind of know what that's about. But a lot of people just jumped immediately when they saw this and go, oh, Putler confirmed, blah blah blah. But again, I think it's a little bit this gets into it a little bit, how the timing of it is a little strange. So this section is called Project Russia, and they say last year, which I guess was 2023, Russia's Prosecutor General's office designated the activities of AllatRa and its creative society as undesirable. They found that AllatRa is a pseudo-religious movement engaged in alleged missionary activities without the status of a religious organization, while Creative Society is a front for its political activities. 3 months after the Russian designation, the Ukrainian Security Services, the SBU, and national police closed down AllatRa in Ukraine, labeling it a religious sect. In contrast to Russian authorities, the SBU found that AllatRa's missionaries justified the armed aggression of Russia against Ukraine and promoted the idea of a union of Slavic peoples under Moscow's leadership. So they kind of said opposite things about one another. Russia did kind of ban them first and say that these guys are sus. They're operating against the interest of the Russian state, whatever, and we're shutting them down. And then Ukraine, did it afterwards and said these people were like working for the Russians and they're Pudler lovers or whatever. So hard, there's a lot of he said, she said here about. Why would the Russians, if they are a Russian op, why would they shut them down first unless it is an extra clever Russian ploy to like give them credibility when they're actually controlled? You can't rule it out, but at the same time, kind of a stretch. So anyways, in a raid of AllatRa's Ukrainian offices, the SBU seized weapons, passports, and books by Anastasia Novik. The content of these books and other materials disseminated by the organization aligned with Russian geopolitical interests, idealizing the Soviet Union and downplaying the crimes of the communist regime, the Ukrainian National Police said. SBU also found books from the series Project Russia by Yuri Shaliganov in the offices. According to a 2018 scientific paper published by a Johns Hopkins journal, the books advocate against democracies and idolize Soviet Russia, asserting that Vladimir Putin's regime is its successor. Court documents show that Ukrainian police are investigating 6 individuals, including Igor Danilov, on suspicion of committing high treason, participating in a criminal organization, and undermining national security. The authorities believe the group distributed over 1.7 million books by Anastasia Novik, which they suspect was Yablachkina's pseudonym. According to court records, Danilov began undermining Ukraine's statehood and promoting Russian propaganda as early as 2002. One of the characters in the Novik books, trained by the KGB and executing tasks for Russian intelligence, was apparently modeled after him. Despite multiple summonses, Danilov never appeared for questioning by Ukrainian authorities, which issued a warrant for his arrest in December 2023 and later named him an internationally wanted person. I believe they eventually found him hiding out in Slovakia a couple years later. Now, going down here to pro-Putin rhetorics, it says there was an academic paper in 2016 from the Kiev Theological Academy who studied the teachings and activities of AllatRa and found it had the characteristics of a cult, identified that they had a guru, Danilov, who is allegedly an extraordinary spiritual being and a prophet. If one meditates or prays at the set times Danilov meditates, they can declare themselves a spiritual entity, followers believe. Moskalyuk's paper also shows that AllatRa spread its ideology in public schools and hospitals under the guise of social projects. He found that in 2015, the movement held lessons in kindness for a Ukrainian elementary school and an introduction to the profession event for young employees of a hospital in Sumy in northeastern Ukraine. By comparing some features of Danilov's language and his use of words, he found an indirect indication that the author or co-author of the Novik books could be none other than Danilov. Quote, "It is a conspiracy theory of a spiritual nature with an obscure background that has spawned a cult." Luigi Corvaglia, co-chair of criminology at the University of Salento, and blah, 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 member of some board, told Ostro he found it cult-like because of the presence of a leader, the use of founding texts, and a theory of the end of the world involving an apocalypse with volcanic explosions and doom, in which only a world united under the creative society will save humanity. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, Nomo. They think Nomo represents, Putin. And then here we go, saving face. When Russian and Ukrainian authorities started proceedings against AllatRa, Egon Chalakian, one of its key members, labeled the actions conspiratorial practices and announced plans to fight back against AllatRa being labeled a religious cult. He also accused FEKRIS, Russian security services, and the Moscow Patriarchate of being part of this conspiracy. This May, at an AllatRa summit in Prague, attended by some 500 people, Chalakian told the crowd that he was lobbying to establish the movement's presence on the international stage and to engage in, quote, anti-cult activities in the U.S. Congress. "We are now developing allies, a force," he announced. Then he went to work. In June, Marina Obtsinova, president of AllatRa International Public Movement and vice president of Creative Society USA, officially asked Chalakian to register as a foreign agent in the U.S. on behalf of AllatRa. The following day, Chalakian dutifully registered as such with the DOJ. While registering, Chalakian listed AllatRa's annual budget for the preparation and dissemination of materials as $150,000 and explained his annual fee was $8,000, according to records. He wrote that his aim as a lobbyist was to focus on, quote, lifting the religious cult designation imposed on AllatRa by Ukrainian and Russian governments. Also in June, Obtsinova and Chalakian participated in a conference at the Vatican hosted by a local nonprofit, Centesimus Annus Pro Pontifice Foundation, CAP, that promotes the Catholic Church's social teachings in society. It was established by John Paul II in 1993. At the conference, they met Pope Francis. Obtsinova handed him Creative Society's climate report, which predicts the world will end in 2036. She's very fond of all these people are fond of like bragging about how they met the Pope and submitted their climate plan and say without any references that the Pope like agreed that it was true or something like that. Yeah. You know, they like love doing it. After the meeting, AllatRa claimed on Facebook that Obtsinova and the movement received the Pope's support and that Chalakian is a member of CAP. According to the bylaws of CAP in the U.S., each member has to come recommended by a Catholic priest. The Vatican did not reply to a request for comment. Neither did CAP, its U.S. chapter, or Obtsinova. Then he registered as a lobbyist with Congress in July for the purpose of, quote, emergency planning needs due to the civil and national security impact of Earth's irreparable geophysical condition. It's irreparable, so you can't fix it. Advanced research of geophysical occurrences and for the protection of AllatRa's scientists and volunteers from hostile foreign governments. He planned to identify, quote, elected officials who actively monitor U.S.-Russian foreign policy matters. This November, Robbie Wells, this is for 2024. This November, Robbie Wells, one of AllatRa and Creative Society's supporters since their inception, is running for a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. He's a former football coach from Virginia who presents himself as a foreign correspondent of Russia Today and believes the AllatRa project is the world's only salvation. Chalakian, too, is publicly vocal about the purpose of AllatRa. He says, our planet is on the brink of self-destruction, and humanity has only a few years left to prevent the impending catastrophe, he said in a recorded call to the scientific community, where he also spoke about the Mariana Trench rupture theory. They did not respond to requests for comment. Now, they do have like a shell company structure here they kind of get into. They say, while Creative Society claims it receives no external funding, archived versions of its website show that the project had over 160 partners between 2021 and 2023. This list of partners who, quote, actively participate in the Creative Society project has since been deleted from the website, but several of them still display the project's visuals on their own websites. One such partner was a company owned by a member of the Czech branch of AllatRa, Radovan Galmus. He also runs an e-shop that sells Creative Society clothing, books, backpacks, and other accessories. ICJK reporters identified 17 Slovak companies that have supported Creative Society, including the dance school for kids in Brezno. Others included a travel agency, an organic products e-shop, a bicycle shop, a publishing house, and a fitness center. In Slovenia, a Creative Society volunteer held mindfulness workshops in 2 high schools. Quote, I would simply recommend to the young and not so young, laymen and experts, everybody who is interested in people, society, happiness, and life, to read the works of Anastasia Novik, he told a student from one of those schools who was writing a research paper. Okay, these books are a goldmine of primordial knowledge presented in an understandable and pleasing way. This knowledge is, at this very moment, changing lives and connecting people all over the world on the basis of finding the best in each one of us, he concluded. The Novik book sales, as well as their local variants, may be one of the few sources of financing for AllatRa and Creative Society. In Croatia, they have been promoted in at least 17 public libraries. Out of the 23 connected companies analyzed by Firehose of Falsehood Partners, 2 of which were dissolved, a publishing house in Russia reported the most significant earnings relative to the rest of the analyzed entities. Those ones banked only a meager income if they didn't report zero earnings or failed to file financial reports. AllatRa Rus, whose main activity is selling books, totaled 182,000 euros in revenue from 2014 to 2023. The company's archive website shows it published books by Novik and one by Danilov on degenerative spinal disease. But it's unclear how much money members and volunteers have poured into AllatRa and Creative Society. Eva Hranova, a former AllatRa coordinator, told Investigate.cz that there was a dedicated bank account to which the Czech volunteers wired money to pay for rent for a local Czech office and for various costs and promotional activities. Many local branch contributions and donations from members were handed over in cash, mostly via 2 Czech individuals. The members were happy to contribute. Quote, everything was voluntary, but there was some pressure. They told us the best investment is in the Creative Society. AllatRa and Creative Society did not respond to requests for comment. They pretty weird overall. But definitely making moves in various places.
Yeah. So this is their explanation of what Allat is. The best way I could summarize it is that it's like destiny. Like it really. I looked at this part for a while. It's obviously translated from Russian, so it doesn't really make any sense. But I'll read it. This is where the sensei does this thing where he'll always mention terms. Like you kind of just saw it in the last part. Like he'll always mention these terms, and all of his disciples will get so excited about needing to hear these terms, an explanation. But he'll just be like, "Come on, guys! No, not right now." So this is on page 286. Of the 4th book of Shambhala, and after being asked a bunch of times, he's finally going to explain what Allat is. He begins. Hold on. It is an aboriginal ancient legend which has been inherited by Earthmen from the highly developed civilization from a planet of Phaeton. It tells about the creation of the whole world, and not only about Earth, as it has been interpreted much later. According to it, great God has conceived to create another world different from his own, and he has manifested his wish. This world has appeared from desire of God, and it was insignificant in the beginning, and it was in chaos. The further intention of God about ordering this world has been embodied by Allat, the creating force of the female nature, which has come from the word of world of God. Allat shows itself as a will of God, a force of God, a part of God, and a protection of God. Protection, asked Ruslan. Well, I would understand will and force, it's clear. But why should it protect God? It's God. Sensei looked at the guy and uttered, grinning, from stupidity of sentient beings. Stupidity of sentient beings? Asked Ruslan in perplexity. But the poor Ruslan, he's like the guy who's always got to be stupid. He's like the Worf of this book, where he just exists to be wrong. Oh. But laugh of the senior guys made him also smile about his sentient question. Sensei waited until emotions of the group fade out and went on. So it was Allat as a power of thought of the God that created a visible world from invisible, transformed chaos into the order, generating space, time, motion, creatures, and also creating harmony in it according to the plan of the God. In such a way, this world appeared. So I feel kind of Allat's the active intellect, kind of, that's maybe one parallel you could draw. But
It kind of sounds. I mean, like divine feminine and masculine as well. Like
yeah,
classic.
definitely. There's this, but a lot. Sometimes he uses he pronouns for a lot, and then the sensei explains that a lot maybe isn't just feminine. It's again like kind of like we were talking before about like why do these like groups always have such incredibly long texts? And I feel like it's I would say before, like I feel like part of it is like to overwhelm you and to present you with like a lot of I'm even looking at this page right now, like the sensei says that was the sense of the original legend about the creation of the world. The true sense of this legend, but however, quote, paradoxical it was, the true sense of this legend that reflects the important role of Allat in the creation of this world started to get lost with the development of the civilization. The general was split into separate parts that have been further interpreted in such a way as to adapt them to the human logic. Of course, it all happened, not without participation of Ahriman's firm hand. Well, he has a really firm hand, stated Eugene, rubbing with a smile his bruise. I guess Ahriman punched him at some point. The senior guys laughed again. Nikolai Andreevich just smiled as everybody hurried up to ask Sensei his question. And what do you mean by interpretation, adaptation of this knowledge to human logic? In my opinion, all you have said may be realized within the scope of consciousness. So you can see how many contradictions there are. Like it is understandable, it's not understandable, it's paradoxical, like a lot is male, a lot is female, like it's
kind of designed to like break down your critical thinking
exactly,
over time.
Just
grind it
almost
down.
It's almost like the sort of it's mental exhaustion in the way these cults often also use or similar groups at least also use physical exhaustion, right? Like you can't really. It's and particularly in English translation, it's also like a gatekeeping mechanism, because they don't want someone who's going to look at this and be like, this is bullshit. They want someone who is like, this is really profound, who's willing to like go through all this stuff.
Right. If they can get some skeptical people to just like storm out, like, right after seeing it and be like, ew, what the fuck is this? Then they want to be rid of those people. They don't want somebody. They want somebody that's just going to get roped in. So it is a little bit of a gatekeeping. They say that about like scam letters, how about like they put typos in it because they want to select for like the most. They don't want people that would like catch a spelling error to like engage with them as scam targets. They want people that's like, oh, even though this looks like a sus ass email, this person still replied to it. So then they kind of know that
emails kind of have that element too, where they like have a fake email address or something like that. Well, it is kind of like I feel like if it's not the typos, it's also just like the logic of it. Like the logic doesn't make any sense of these like phishing scams. They're like, oh, like, hi mom, like I dropped my phone in the sink.
Can you Venmo
like, can you call me
$500?
at my friend's phone number? Like, and it's like, but like you have to be willing to believe that in order to, but think
about we talked about with Peter from events in Ukraine, the PTK call centers in Ukraine that were run by like the mafia and various groups that just like psychologically destroy like Russian people by like roping them into ever greater scams, and then like they don't want to admit that they were scammed, so they just like keep doing it, and that kind of that's something that is active in Ukraine.
But you do see like at least a wide reading of the author of this book. He does like show some familiarity with with Islam, which in some ways is surprising because it really is something you don't see so often, especially like not so prominently. But I guess it does show like kind of the different sort of sensibility of Russian esotericism. You see that in the references to Phaeton and how prominent Phaeton is in all of this, right? Like that obviously is also like, and you do see also this, maybe we'll read some more later on, where you see the passages where you really see the sort of, in some cases, a little bit of ambivalence, like about certain figures, but definitely like a reverence and a nostalgia for the Soviet Union, right? Like all these books take place during the Soviet period, and there is kind of this sense of like Paradise Lost or like Unity Lost that like inflects these whole things, right? In fact, at one point there's even a sort of analogy made, I think in Izoosmos, where the sensei is talking to some like another sort of idiot character that often appears, like who's a sort of conventional priest, There's a lot of iterations of this character, but it's like Father John or something in this book, and he says like, "You're telling me the world's gonna end? Like that can't be." And he's like, "Would you have foreseen the collapse of the Soviet Union if like it was right after Andropov gave his speech to the assembly or whatever?" It's like,
wow. I mean, they did in a way. They were dealing with like a total collapse of like their society. It had to be such fertile kind of hunting ground for like various cults that promised a kind of return to civilizational greatness and renewal, and whatever. Yeah. And or also just like a sense of like shock, like a loss of identity, like who are we? What is our culture? Yeah, exactly. Like, in the same vein of what you said, but also like the sort of like, who are we?
Guess,
the sense of
direction
or destiny is to been lost or completely.
I mean, imagine if the U.S. were broken up into states, and you like, okay, wait, like I'm not an American anymore. I guess I'm like, a Californian, like or
right.
something,
it would be tough. We don't have pre-existing. We don't have the deep like pre-existing. We're all like settler states, like with random assortments of people in them. So it's harder to have a USSR Yugoslavia style breakup along like a kind of ethno-linguistic or even religious like lines, like maybe to some extent, but only to the extent that maybe like the South is much more deeply like evangelical, and there's much more like there's much more Catholics and like moderate Protestants in like the North and the Midwest. And
you could have a vague breakup, probably. you probably could have like large cultural blocks.
Think, like the way our politics are like laid out is always like urban areas versus rural areas. That's the one area where, and then everybody does kind of share still like a kind of fundamental like monoculture and shared language and like not super deep, well defined like roots is like what's the most you could say? It's like Texas was its own country for like 10 years, but still was like all settlers there. So
there's lots of like Latinos in the U.S. and obviously Black people. Like that's kind of a different culture too. So there
was that idea of
lines,
the oppressed nation of like the Deep South, like could be its own breakaway country, and like maybe and parts of like former Mexico that
and I mean
became
of course
America.
We did have a civil war, so that is like what
right. But then again, even that was like there was certain differences in the economic systems that produced like a contradiction that led to them seeing like there's a clear line between the states that had like outlawed the formal slave economy and those that like hadn't. Today we all kind of have like slop capitalism, like with just tons of interstate like interaction.
Well, I don't think anything like that would actually occur,
right.
But or at least certainly not on a near future time scale. I mean, I guess it won't matter because in 10 years we're all going to be living on Mars.
We'll
but
be dead,
but the
I don't know,
but like it's not really a great analogy for obvious reasons, but just to give a sense of the.
Well, if you think about maybe within just Russia itself, like putting aside the kind of the other republics that like broke up, but like the transformation that Russia went to, I think that could be maybe more analogous to the way the United States could kind of like, and then you did have certain separatist, like the Chechen Wars, for example, like certain areas maybe like got into it with the national government, and there was like massive crime and like breakdown of authority and things like that. While still having like nuclear weapons and stuff, but being like kind of in a state of internal collapse. I could see something like that happening in the United States, but like it still might stay as like one country or something like that, even if pan-Wisconsinism, somebody says in the chat.
Sorry, what did they say?
Pan-Wisconsinism.
Pan-Wisconsinism, yeah. But there's definitely cultural blocks. But anyway, this is what Sensei says about Allat. Like this is a little bit interesting. Yeah, this is sort of somewhat of a unique aspect, I guess. Maybe they felt that it was unique, which is why they emphasize it in the name. Like one of the disciples asks, like, what instances of the name Allat are there in these ancient records? The Sensei says, well, for example, in pre-Islamic times, the Arabs of Arabia honored the goddess of heaven and rain called Allat. In the divine pantheons of the Arabs from the Syrian desert, Allat was considered to be a spouse of Allah and to be a mother of gods. Some Arab tribes honored Allat as a god of the sun, but more often it was associated with the planet of Venus and identified with the goddess of love. By the way, the main center of her cult in the Arabic peninsula was the city of Taif. There was her temple and her holy place. And the Arabs worshipped not some image of the goddess, as was common in India, but their sacred white granite stone with decorations that was thought to be connected with Allat. On the body, at the rise of Islam, Muhammad destroyed the Taif holy place, but he prohibited to hunt and to fell trees in this area. Moreover, he recognized the divine nature of Allat, but according to Quran 53, 19 to 23, afterwards Muhammad denied it. That's a reference to the satanic verses, because these are verses kind of calling out and denouncing the belief in Allat, where the satanic verses are supposed to have originally appeared. Arabs worshipped Allat? Nikolai Andreevich was so surprised as if he didn't expect to hear it. Sensei slightly bowed his head towards him and answered with an even more intrigue in his words. I will tell you even more. Now the language experts assume that the word Allat, in their opinion, is a substitute of the forbidden name of the deity, and they believe that it was probably created from the nominal Ilahat, goddess, with a definite article that means well-known goddess, this goddess, goddess by priority. Again, it just means the goddess if it's a definite article. But anyway, by the way, whoever wrote this does not have a good grasp of languages, the languages that are used. By the way, the same method they apply also to interpret the word Allah. But in regards to Allat, the language experts don't know the original ancient legend. Well, Sensei, Volodya said with admiration as if he told us something special, you again surprised me by your knowledge of East. For sure, I have never heard something like that. There is nothing surprising. Sensei shrugged his shoulders. Broadly speaking, almost all ancient East knew about Allat. In China, there is still known a quite ancient myth about Four-Mother Nui Hua, who is believed to be a creator of all things and people. Or if you take the book of Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu, it tells also that in the chaos before heaven and earth appeared, formless Tao was born and can be considered the mother of Chanxia under heaven. This Tao acts also as a creating, organizing force in the chain human, heaven, Tao, nature. Different oral legend were popular among people. They were adapted understanding by simple people. And if we regard that very China in 3rd century AD, there were legends which told that the universe looked like initially as some kind of hen's egg, and forefather Pangu was born. Pan is translated as dish, and Gu is ancient. The origin of natural phenomena was associated with him. The guys grinned, and Nikolai Andreevich said, it's not astounding that people distorted so much primary knowledge. A great deal depends on the person who tells and whom he tells. So, there you go. That's what Allat is. But Allat is also, I guess, I'm hearing the telltale signs of Dimitri not being there. Okay, yeah, but so I'll keep going. Allat is also has a scientific meaning, which is that it's an integral time unit that has an enormous meaning for the whole material world. If to take the modern description of Earth time, Allat consists of 12 minutes, to be more precise, 11 minutes, 56 and 74 seconds. 56.74 seconds, I guess. When scientists will discover the meaning of this most important part of the foundation, so to say, the main building block of the macrocosm, it will not just be a great revolution in science, it will be a real evolutionary leap forward. Then scientists will understand the secret of time, and on its basis they will find out the real process of material creation of the universe. If you will get to know the sense of Allat, they will discover huge opportunities. For example, now when making astronomical researches, people see only the past beauty of former worlds. But with God's help, with further development of science and investigation of secrets of Allat, people will be able to see the real magnificence of the present of other worlds. That is, to get to know much more great creations of the God.
What does he mean by that? Like see faster than the speed of light or something?
I guess so. Yeah, I guess we'll be able to see the present once we realize that Allat consists of 11 minutes and 56.74 seconds.
Right. Yeah, there's a very specific number they came up with.
Yes. We will be able to do this. But yeah, so then he actually kind of explains Phaeton a little bit. And this kind of ties into the global choice. So the word of God, which created the universe, since a human is a part of God, he is given the right of choice, including the global choice. What does it mean, the global choice? Asked Andrew. I will explain it now. From time to time, at certain peak moments of human civilization, a certain lot is thrown to the world of people, the sound agapted formula of initial sound. By whom is it thrown? The bodhisattvas of Shambhala. But why? Ruslan got surprised. These are the rules, determined not by them, since people should have right of the global choice, though it's always a huge risk, and correspondingly the big responsibility for the one who decides to use this formula of the initial sound. Since a human, due to the initial sound, gains a huge power which can both create and destroy, this is what people call keys from paradise and hell. Everything depends on spectrum of wishes of the human who will possess these keys. Do you want to say that this power might get to bad hands? Volodya developed his thought. This possibility, of course, always exists. During all the time of existence of this civilization, the adapted formula of the initial sound was given to people 6 times, and thanks to God, it didn't cause its global use and negative aspect as happened on Phaeton. Otherwise, it would mean the turning of the monad, that is, the total annihilation of humankind, maybe even together with the planet. Is that also serious? Nikolai Andreevich asked thoughtfully. More than you think. And what happened on Phaeton? Kostya asked with interest. Stupid thing, Sensei replied with bitterness. If you add to this day 43 days more, exactly 5,105 years ago, there happened annihilation on one of the beautiful planets of our galaxy, Phaeton. Our philosopher, by some reason, hastily started to calculate. Moreover, he did it aloud. So today, we have the 28th of June, 1991, plus 43 days minus 5,105 years ago. It was... Hardly our philosopher finished his calculations when he got a critical remark from Andrew. It was a long time ago, the guy said with the tone which didn't allow any objectives. He said it obviously so that Kostya would stop to philosophize and not hinder him to listen. That's very funny, that sort of translation issues would stop to philosophize. I'm having an epiphany here where like a lot of people I knew in Russia would like refer to me as a philosopher at times, and I'm like, how am I a philosopher? But I think like maybe like there's some kind of issue where like some word in Russian gets translated to English as philosopher, which means like something much broader. Because like how is someone who's doing math a philosopher?
Like intellectual or
maybe
like scholar or something?
Yeah, maybe. Yes. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah.
Academic or something like, oh, you're a philosopher.
Yeah, maybe. I think possibly. Yeah. It was the 5th planet of our solar system. Its orbit was located between Mars and Jupiter. Phaeton was quite a big planet. Its mass, in fact, exceeded the mass of Earth 17 times. It was a beautiful planet with the atmosphere similar to the one of Earth. It had nice oceans, lovely landscapes. 1 year on Phaeton lasted for 260 Phaetonian days. If to interpret it in earthly time, 1 year on Phaeton was equal to 1,898 earthly days. So it means that 1 year on Phaeton is equal almost to our 5 years, specified Nikolai Andreevich. But to be more precise, 5.2. 1 day on Phaeton is equal to 75.2 earthly hours. On that planet, 1 day was divided into 20 equal parts, that is, into 20 hours. In earthly terms, their 1 hour was equal to 8.76 earthly hours. 876 is a comma, whatever. Time is different on Phaeton. Yeah. But they also had a spiritual nature. They were sentient creatures who resembled human beings, but they had a mixture of spiritual and animal and material nature. Humanoids may differ from each other by their matter, that is body, but they all live according to the same laws of spiritual and material synthesis. I guess this really does show like what the solution to the problem is, which is, to resist the animal nature and to transcend and become spiritual. Although I guess that didn't save the Phaetonians, but I guess they were foolish. So.
Yeah, I mean, it is funny because they go back and forth. Like Chalakian kind of will say that like there's an inescapable, unsolvable crisis, but then also you must join the creative society because we're the only ones that can save you. Is that meant to imply like they're going to ascend or something and become spirit beings when the whole world is destroyed? Like that's the only way to quote unquote.
Everyone like believes in AllatRa, then like the world won't end.
So really mind over matter, like mass consciousness will save everybody?
Yeah.
Interesting.
he he explains that the mass of photons exceeded the Earth's mass. Of course, if it exploded, it would be such a powerful explosion the neighboring planets Mars and Jupiter would be affected seriously, Earth as well. Exactly, nodded Sensei. Thus it happened without outbursts of powerful energy. Phaeton just disappeared. That's what it means when the adapted formula of the initial sound gets to bad hands, or to be more precise, head. Having gained power over power, they wanted to make an experiment. They finished badly pleasing their megalomania. Sensei sighed heavily, kept silence for a while, and then said, so despite that intense development due to which Phaetonians were considerably ahead of us, one of the most beautiful planets of our galaxy, which was inhabited by such developed civilization, doesn't exist today. I don't get it. How come the matter collapsed? What has happened there? Ruslan couldn't get the sense of the conversation. Sensei repeated, human stupidity. He threw a handful of sand underneath and made it even with the rest of the sand. Why do you think the Archons hunt for centuries after something that people today call the Grail? Because having gained this power over power, they wouldn't need any super weapon for frightening the population. With such domination of the animal nature in the minds of people like the Archons, even opening access to the true world of God through the initial sound will not prevent them from realization of mean material wishes, the dream of absolute power over other people. So, the Archons, that kind of gets into the issue of what Ra means. And he explains that as well. I'll read that part. Then we'll give this book a break for a little bit. But the Archons, do come up here, and they're quite sinister. Hold on, it's around page like 200 in this prologue here. There's so much
prologue. Wow.
There's so much of this. I need to scroll to it. What have the priests of the Archons done? Khufu, block this, blah, blah, blah. Going to ancient Egypt. Hold on, sorry. I'm just going to search for Ra with a period. That's how to bring it up. Okay, you do see a little bit of the pan-Slavist element here, too. As usual, because there is either no good chance or information. But as they say, there is time for everything. So as far as places concerned which were visited by Osiris, not by occasion the ancient name of the Volga River is Ra, and not by, coincidence, such an untypical for those people plant as a lotus flower was brought there, and surely not for the appearance the so-called today Altai princesses, in fact virgins of knowledge, made themselves special tattoos from symbols in ancient times. All of that has the same roots of origin of this knowledge. So the one who wishes will get knowledge. Sensei looked attentively at the curious faces of the guys and continued his story. So, bodhisattvas, when among people, not only took care of people like about babies in the cradle, but it was natural that they communicated with the representatives of their civilizations, and there is something extraordinary in it. In principle, the humankind has a chance to develop such a level during the next 100 years that it can freely visit other worlds. And at those times, this communication between bodhisattvas and representatives of other worlds were normal. And it's quite natural because however developed is the material civilization, it will strive to communication with more developed creatures, particularly when, as I have already said, bodhisattvas were for quite a long time present among people that time. Was it something like a unique chance for representatives of other worlds to cognize more than they know? Right you are, Sensei nodded. That's why the presence of that cosmodrome not far from Egypt, on the territory of modern Libya, it's preserved, by the way, till now. Cosmodrome? We asked almost unanimously. Yes, shoulders Sensei calmly replied to our general surprise. Now it is called by scientists Baalbek Veranda. It's a huge platform built from gigantic blocks. Each of them weighs 360 tons, with special holes in each side of the platform. Archaeologists still rack their brains over its destination, although unlike worldviews of people from previous epochs, they started at least to guess that it looks like a cosmodrome, Sensei grinned. Their naivety is striking. They look for traces of soot from the spaceship's fuel, and mean by fuel the one with its components which is known nowadays, Sensei stated with surprise. What tanks should one have with such fuel in order to go to, for example, Sirius and to come back? They are so ridiculous. They look for traces of combustive lubricating stuff, and even don't assume that there are a lot of other sources of alternative energy, which are more economical and environmentally safe. Well, as I say, everybody relies on information available to him. Apart from Baalbek Veranda, there were other cosmodromes that didn't require such a big landing place. There was a region in the immediate bottom of the Nile flower for such spaceships. It's natural this intensive traffic was noticed by people. That's quite curious. That's why quite curious ancient legends about that time were preserved in the memory of generations. Blah, 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 what legends, et cetera, et cetera. There's some more stuff about Imhotep and the Freemasons. So
they do think the United States was founded by Freemasons, right?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
The archons are, they very, very powerful. What have the archons priests done? By creating first their secret religious teaching, they turned, in fact, everything inside out very skillfully and bound life aspiration of a human not to his spiritual but to his animal nature. Since the new religion in Egypt was mainly formed by immigrants from Asia, where the archons had already strong centers in Mesopotamia, its bigger part consisted of magic but not ethical beliefs. They have done so that the after-death future of the after-death future of a man depended not on his righteous behavior during his life, but on his knowledge of magic formulas, thoroughness, and observance of religious rites complicated by them. These magic formulas were known, of course, only to the chosen priest. A man had to serve them loyally and for a long time before they revealed to him some of these empty trifles. Later, when this concept was implemented for the masses, the priest turned this religion into quite a profitable enterprise, enriching them and trading with alleged magic formulas. To make it even more attractive for their buyers, the priest supplemented the concept of the after-death paradise with popular rumors among people about spiritual achievements of Imhotep's disciples. Which ones, for example? Nikolai Andreevich asked. For example, there were rumors that some of the spiritually strong disciples of Imhotep didn't die like ordinary mortal people, but turned after their death into shining spirits. As one would say today, they joined God's host. And according to the concept of ancient Egyptians, they accompanied their god in his journey in the dangerous night. That they became united with God, but at the same time, they didn't lose their individuality. That they deserved the eternal life of the kingdom of light by their temporary life. It was so in principle, though not in such a fairy tale form, as it was rumored by people. So what the priests of the archons have done, they have written in their concept that if a man believes in their religion and not any other religious concept in Egypt, any of their believers will become a chosen one among the dead ones after his death. After his death, he will be transformed into a shining spirit and will accompany God Ra in his voyage along Duat. But his happy existence in the after-death world depends exclusively on the formula he can purchase from priests during his life, which will let him reach one or another hour zone in the after-death world. Well, Volodya grinned. It's not a small business with water, so to say a small trickery, it's serious business on trading air. Air trickery, Eugene hurried on to express his definition. After that, the group just rolled with laughter. I don't get it, but whatever. When everybody, maybe it makes sense in Russian. And when everybody calmed down, Sensei continued. As always, there was use a traditional political formula of the archons. Those who are not with us are against us. Human enemies of Ra were declared, all who didn't worship his on earth. These people were doomed by priests to suffer in lakes of eternal fire. You know, it's so similar so many religious sects of the present, Nikolai Andreevich remarked. And what have you thought? People see only the top, but they don't see the bottom. And if you dig deeper, you can notice that its root is of Arconian origin. Though an attentive person will notice mold still on the leaves, without deepening into the underground part of the plant. That's true, Nikolai Andreevich agreed. It turns out that this myth about lakes of eternal fire was born still at that time, Kostya got surprised. According to the concept of those times corrected by the priests, Sensei answered him, since the religion of Ra sun worshippers became dominant later in Egypt, Copts inherited their respective views. In their view, hell was inhabited by demons with snakeheads, lions, crocodiles who pulled out a soul from the body of the doomed human and stabbed it with great savageness, cut it, plunged arrows into its sides, and whipped it to the river of fire and threw it there. After that, a suffering soul, under their views, was thrown into the eternal darkness and shattered with teeth from shrilling cold. But despite these tortures, it didn't end its existence and got in some time to the first hour zone of a duat. He goes on about the Khafra, but first of all, these renewed religious concept was tested by the Archon's priests on the rest of their secret organization, and it was successful. New people began to get interested in it. They joined this organization because they have thought that these are those famous spiritually free bricklayers. Then these new priests of Ra became more active and began to convert secretly mighty aristocracy from different nomes to this new religion, coming closer to members of the pharaoh's family. Many people who looked for the society of spiritually free bricklayers began to get to the society of, quote, Freemasons under the influence of the renewed cult of Ra. The cult of Ra began to gain popularity. Due to their cunning political maneuvers, these priests obtained a formal acknowledgement of their religion during the reign of the next pharaoh Khafra, imposing a title of Son of Sun to the pharaoh and spreading their influence to other cults. One should mention that the pharaoh Khafra was quite a strong and energetical man, as I have already said. He was also a member of the kernel of the organization of Freemasons. By the way, one could find signs of spiritually free bricklayers even in his sculpture, which remains till our days, the diorite sculpture. They are a falcon behind the back of the pharaoh, which protects its head with the wings, the throne of the pharaoh floriated with the lotus, as well as lions' paws and heads. All these signs are not just, as they consider it today, decorations and the symbols of a king's power. They point out to concrete significant places for spiritually free bricklayers and some signs of people of knowledge from the past. They say that they hated him because I guess he came to clash with, the archons. And then, he goes on to, how the archons, with their manipulations, their Freemasonic manipulations, they destroyed Egypt, and archons can destroy any country. Their favorite method is to, insinuate Freemasons into power, and then cause disunity, and then split the country into small parts, and then cause it to collapse.
Interesting.
So,
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah. And there's a continuity basically directly to the Freemasons of today, who are basically the United States. NATO, but also passing through kind of like Enlightenment era occultists, and there's a very heavy Jewish element in the archons, as you might expect.
Right.
They are very there's a lot of Rothschilds as well in the Freemasons.
It is funny because that hasn't stopped them from making some powerful friends in kind of the Israeli community, and in Israel itself, and also there was this rabbi figure has popped up doing a lot of their events, Rabbi Moshe Reuven Azman, who I guess is one of the two people who claims to be the chief rabbi of Ukraine. But this is a guy who hangs out with like Laura Loomer and all these sus American politicians, and he was at this big event that happened earlier this year, which is pretty interesting. I believe this was called the Spiritual Diplomacy event. I think it was like in February, and this kind of shows you the circles they're moving in now. I guess it was put on by this evangelical pastor, Mark Burns, who has been like a Trump supporter and quote unquote spiritual advisor since 2016. And he was sort of like the figurehead, but basically this conference was put on by AllatRa in Washington, D.C. So this rabbi was at the conference. Most of the leadership of AllatRa were at it, and let me see.
Congressman Mark Harris, Congressman Gus M. Bilirakis, George Simeon, Congressman Joe Wilson, the Romanian author Mihail George Niamtu, and Brock Pierce was there.
Of course he was.
Matt Schlapp, the chairman of the American Conservative Union.
Damn.
Another rabbi, Rabbi Duvi Honig. Rabbi Shlomo Moshe Amar. Is that the guy who you mentioned? Yeah.
It's Reuven Moshe Reuven Osman.
Oh, okay. Shlomo Moshe Amar is, I guess, the former Sephardic chief rabbi of Israel. I mean, I guess, not to say that any of these people aren't sus or whatever, but I certainly they are. But it's also possible that they don't quite realize what even AllatRa is, or don't care. If they probably don't realize that. It's they believe that the Star of David is archonic symbol that is meant to signify like the true masters of America, who are the archons and stuff like that.
I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I guess it depends. Like, because I mean, it's kind of like the Moonies. By the way, there were a couple like Mooney representatives that were at this conference like too. Where it's like people don't choose not to pay that close attention to like the absolutely bad shit, like really offensive things like Moon would say, and then just act like they just they're a powerful like good religious organization that believes in democracy or something like that.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Like that. That's very much what this event had going on for it. I think. There was an article I found by Dr. Stephen Hassan, who I guess was a Mooney in the 70s, but then got away from it, and I think is like part of that Dave Troy kind of sphere of people. But so he thinks that this is a Russian Secret Services operation, but still sometimes the connections they draw are interesting. He writes here that as part of a recent slew of lobbying efforts, AllatRa has announced a conference to take place on January 22nd, 2026 at the U.S. Capitol Complex featuring spiritual ambassadors hosted by Pastor Mark Burns. Burns, a figure connected to Trump's faith operations, has also participated in Michael Flynn's Reawaken America tours. There's another like weird theosophy hit, right? Mm-hmm. Like Michael Flynn's got that kind of vibe. Meanwhile, Flynn, deeply involved with the Moonies, has organized Rod of Iron freedom festivals to recruit and train militias for the civil war they foresee. The conference on Capitol Hill advertises many key figures from other cults that frequently lobby Washington, including Michael Jenkins and Damian Dunkley, senior leaders in the Moonies, as well as Greg Locke, a controversial non-denominational pastor who drew national attention several years ago for hosting book burnings at his church. In researching this group, I discovered that AllatRa had produced an 8-hour documentary complete with AI-generated voices and 3D modeled figures, which names me specifically as part of what they claim is a vast anti-cult conspiracy against humanity. According to AllatRa's propaganda mouthpiece, my book, The Cult of Trump, was written not as a legitimate analysis of authoritarian influence tactics, but as part of a deliberate effort to dehumanize Trump supporters, making it psychologically easier for non-supporters to take up arms against them eventually. Of course, this is nonsense. The documentary disturbingly frames my work and that of my colleagues Dave Troy and Alex Alvarova as nothing less than, quote, terroristic attacks designed to divide Americans and foment civil war, allegedly employing Nazi techniques in the process of bringing about the Fourth Reich. So he says, they're doing Darvo, which, they probably are. And he mentions the disturbing 3D AI-generated figure of George Washington, used presumably to garner authority credibility with patriotic Americans. He says, what strikes me most is the sophistication and scale of this response. This is an organized, well-sourced operation that produces resource-heavy propaganda and targets specific critics by name. I did see that with a lot of people, like, YouTubers, like, I can't, they're going to come after me for this one, kind of like, don't come after us. AllatRa, all alleged. What we're saying.
It's alleged,
here.
alleged.
It's all alleged. But they say that they operate through the Creative Society Front, blah blah blah. Actually, this is an interesting like angle that I wasn't quite aware of. Not all the big videos kind of mention this, but this is a potential way to trace like where did this group kind of originally emerge from. He says here under the dubious origins of AllatRa. AllatRa was formally registered in Kiev in July 2014, and its founders, Igor Mikhailovich Danilov and Halina Yablachkina, both hail from the same territory that produced the White Brotherhood, an apocalyptic cult of 1990s Ukraine. The movement was built around a series of books attributed, to one Anastasia Novik. Many view AllatRa as a continuation of the White Brotherhood project, noting that they both share apocalyptic themes and utilize similar propaganda methods. While direct documentation linking the movements remains somewhat elusive, the geographic and ideological parallels have drawn scrutiny from Ukrainian religious scholars. Yeah, I went down a whole rabbit hole with like what was the early 90s White Brotherhood, and it was a pretty crazy and like kind of similar vibe, definitely like very strong with like the kind of mix of like Slavic pagan and like theosophical concepts like mashed together. And
I think we also talked about that a little bit in our Unbinding episode.
I don't know if did we talk about the White Brotherhood cult? It was founded in 1990, and it was this woman who came to call herself like Maria Devi Christ.
Was
that it? But did we also talk about like the other founder? Again, it's like a woman and a man are kind of like the founders, but the Yuri Krivanogov, who was a specialist in psychological influence and a cybernetics engineer. And then the Marina Tsvigun, who became Maria Devi Christos, was like, it kind of went and like heard a lecture by him. And then they sort of embarked wearing these like white robes. And I found all of these like very panicked articles and like videos and stuff from the early 90s of, arrests that were going on. They eventually, like, the police kind of cracked down on them. But I do believe that, the guy, again, I'm forgetting his name, Krivanogov, was like, became a Hare Krishna in like the late 80s and then kind of moved on from that to starting this cult. Allegedly, he also collaborated with the secret department of the KGB that studied mass consciousness manipulation. So a lot of people tie it back to like that was some kind of social manipulation operation at like the very end of like the Soviet Union in 1990 that outlasted it, and like the Russian sort of post KGB deep state was kind of managing this thing.
No, a lot of people say that it was like a Russian like intelligence operation, at the time, like, a Soviet intelligence operation, right?
Right.
Yeah.
At the same time, he abandoned, during Perestroika, he suddenly abandoned his scientific career and became a Hare Krishna devotee, and then left the ISKCON, the main group, in 1990, and founded his own organization, Institute of the Soul Atma, which later became known as the White Brotherhood. Yeah, it does say here he worked at the Institute of Clinical and Experimental Medicine in Novosibirsk and cooperated with the Mykolaiv Center of Psychotronics, where, under the aegis of the KGB, an, quote, antidote to the CIA's mind control projects was being prepared. That is very interesting. I mean, you can't quite rule out that was this a foreign thing inserted during Perestroika or the tail end of Perestroika to manipulate, post-Soviet society, and then they got this guy to like become a one-shotted turncoat, in a way similar to what the Hare Krishnas were accused of being, like previously in the 80s, as kind of a new age fifth column in a way. And then once the Soviet Union was actually collapsed, like the terrain was suddenly completely open for these groups to like blow up, and blow up it did, and it culminated in them like taking over a cathedral and like protesting during it.
Attempted mass suicide, basically.
Right, they tried to commit mass suicide, and then like when Marina was like arrested and then put on trial, I think a bunch of the followers were like put in jail, but then they all went on a hunger strike and like said we're gonna die anyways, until Marina finally like gave the pronouncement that they should stop their hunger strike, and then things kind of cooled off from there. And I think she went on to kind of do various like occult adjacent new age things after getting out of jail.
Active, whereas he isn't. We talked a little.
I don't. He's still alive, but I guess he's pretty old now. He's like 85. And so but then there have been rumors that the main author of like the AllatRa books was a member of the Great White Brotherhood cult in the early
That
90s, which has
wouldn't be
not
surprising.
been, it hasn't
Yeah.
been like definitively pinned down, but a lot of people say that there is like a long kind of continuity, and like there's too many similarities for this to kind of just come out of like totally nowhere, because there were like tens of thousands of followers of this cult around the time it was kind of disrupted. And I think there was an academic like paper that was published recently that I really wanted to it was like in a journal called AllatRa and Creative Society, cult like Slavic pagan offshoot, that I can't get access to yet because it's like so new. But maybe just the extract from this article about them does have some like interesting information that, I don't know, it might be relevant. I haven't heard it really repeated so much. So they say that almost 30 years ago, a new community began to form around the figures of Anastasia Novik and Igor Mikhailovich Danilov, which today can be regarded as a dynamically developing new religious movement. The community has operated under several names over time. Whether we refer to it as the Geliars, Warriors of Light, AllatRa, or Creative Society, it's the same movement that originally started in Ukraine around 1995. So that's actually much early. You hear about AllatRa, it like started in 2014, but like 1995 is basically right after the Great White Brotherhood was kind of broken up and outlawed and the people were put in jail. So like, okay. And then it was this year that they published, or at least claimed to publish, their first treatise, Crossroads. Although the community was officially registered as AllatRa in Kiev in 2014, there had been several decades of active engagement in diverse forms. We can mention here a whole series of projects organized by this community during this period, such as the, quote, Climate, the No to Violence in Family and Society, or One Grain, I guess movements. These are different movements. Ringing Cedars Anastasianism, Ringing Cedars Anastasianism, founded in Russia in 1997, was popular among Czechian and Slovakian members who later joined AllatRa in large numbers. From this point on, if not before, AllatRa was influenced by Slavic-inspired contemporary paganism, or SICP, not least specifically Russian syncretism. While AllatRa was not overtly religious, at the same time it had a strong Slavic message, making it attractive for SICP sympathetic members. The appeal of this message and SICP sympathies, more generally, was enabled by the fluidity and experimentalism of post-communist new religious movements, where pan-Slavism was a recognizable and deeply ingrained concept. AllatRa, although having many characteristics divergent from SICP, can be seen as a stark example of contemporary pagan syncretism, and perhaps most significantly for this chapter, it has inherited many of the ideological and organizational vulnerabilities of SICP. In AllatRa, these can lead to unforeseen and unique ideologies that present possible threats in their own right. Therefore, the authors offer AllatRa as a case study in the prospect of problems emerging from broader societal challenges that SICP presents, ... So I don't know what else they say, but that's like the general vibe of it. But I think the important thing there is that it's, whatever this group is, at the core of it started around 1995 and went by a number of names for, that's almost 20 years before it actually like cohered into this like kind of current form that it exists in. And they put it squarely in this like Slavic inspired contemporary paganism context, which is definitely not how they present themselves like in general today. They try to say that they're just like scientists, I guess, who just have some great ideas about bringing the world together.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I found a little bit more of this article. The AllatRa community strives to form a universal brotherhood of humanity, to investigate and unveil the hidden powers in human beings, to promote the comparative study of religions, philosophy, and science. The AllatRa community also strives to fulfill all, the unified brotherhood of humanity, according to AllatRa, should be realized through the creation of the Creative Society, a new social format based on the understanding that all people originate from one grain, one truth that is inherent to all, emphasizing our common humanity and the desire to live. The revelation of hidden powers and truths is offered through the theological writings of the community, primarily the book AllatRa, where the character Rigdon Giappa, the Lord of Shambhala, shares his knowledge. The movement also endeavors to support the study of religion and science through its primary theological sources, blah, blah, like YouTube channels. So, one might describe AllatRa's alternative, a Slavic pagan religion, and that AllatRa consciously and deliberately draws upon historical Slavic paganism and attentively explores it in official material. Some pages are omitted. Yeah, this is a preview. It's not, the book isn't on Anna's, but among the range of original Slav knowledge, peculiar emphasis is placed on an alleged primordial Slavic meditation technique called Chetverik. Yeah, that's what, is being talked about. AllatRa claims this meditation was meant for spiritual development and the recognition of the so-called four beings. The practice is integrated into the daily life by community members. Yeah. Although active since 1995, it was not until 2010 that the first official registration of the community took place in Kiev under the name Lagoda LLC. 3 years later, in 2013, a significant book of the movement titled AllatRa was released. As a result, the community gradually adopted the same name as the aforementioned publication. From that point onward, its complete appellation has been International Public Movement AllatRa, which was officially registered in 2014. Around that time, the members of the movement drew theological content primarily from the books about the so-called sensei from Shambhala. This is a four-part saga that was published shortly after the year 2000. In these books, blah, 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 people know what's going on in the sensei, or kind of, they get the sensei books. The community originates from Ukraine. It now claims to be actively present in more than 180 countries. While these claims cannot be reliably verified, it is certain that Ukraine is no longer the only country where the movement operates. It has successfully spread to former Soviet bloc nations, particularly Russia, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic. Based on an assessment of the number of various internet profiles controlled by the community, profiles in the Russian language received the highest level of following. While this does not conclusively prove that AllatRa has its largest presence in Russia, this information holds some indicative value. Additionally, there are tens of thousands of followers on communication channels in Czech and Slovak languages, with lesser interest in profiles in English and other languages. This information leads to an important question. What is the number of followers on social media? Yeah, it cuts off there. But it talks about how Igor Danilov is its charismatic leader. Members of the movement associate him with various figures such as Rigdon Giappa, sensei from Shambhala, the reincarnation of Agapit Pechersky, and even with the Holy Spirit, who will judge people after their death. In some videos published by the AllatRa community, Danilov refers to himself as the Mahdi, a figure from Shiite Islam, well, from Islam in general, actually, who was believed to guide humanity through the days of the apocalypse. However, in other videos, he portrays himself as an entirely ordinary participant in the Creative Society project. Yet, as other research extensively discussed, the charismatic nature of a spiritual leader is mostly constructed by the followers, more accurately through the relationship between both parties. Danilov employs various methods to strengthen that bond between himself and the members of the movement and reinforces charisma. Members learn to recognize his charisma among themselves when watching videos that Danilov frequently publishes. In these videos, Danilov further explains the teachings found in the books and expresses his views on the activities of the Creative Society. They're used to criticize those who left the movement or journalists who write about the community.
They're attacked. The anti-cult movement.
Exactly.
They bang on that drum. I saw references to, there's a kind of like a Nexium style, like inner sex cult. I think he calls the women that are his like close advisors or entourage, like birds, birds or something. And I think there might have been some like allegations from defectors. Again, I don't know for sure, but I saw some talk about that. This guy, he was a chiropractor from Donetsk, and I think he's in eastern Slovakia, kind of laying low right now. And there's been some weird like movements where investigative journalists in Slovakia have like written about, like revealed where he's staying and done stories about him, and then they've been threatened by prosecutors in Slovakia who are like kind of repeating the anti-cult line. Like they're accusing journalists of engaging in anti-cult activity, which is like criminal, I guess now. Like, so, the people are saying this has like a dark, would set a dark precedent for press freedom in the EU. That's for some reason you're not allowed to like, like criticize this sus guy and I don't know to what degree it's caught up in like the Russia-Ukraine issue, where, because, then these journalists say, well, he repeats Putler talking points, like, so, we should be able to write critical things about him. But then you think in most places in Europe, in the EU, it already is like borderline not allowed to, I think there's a heavy expectation and pressure to be very anti-Russia and like more pro-Ukrainian. So it's kind of like, what if that's the case, and like what gives? Why are prosecutors like covering for this group? It's odd. And then meanwhile, like after these bans, it almost sounds like that's led to like an intensification of their activities lobbying in the United States. It also might be convenient because Trump is back and they feel like they have a really good shot with people that are close to him, like. That
was something that like a lot of these, like that's kind of one of the like aspects of the sort of interpretation that they're like sort of sympathetic to Putin, that like they do tend to focus on criticizing like like democratic parties versus like opposition populist parties in the Czech Republic.
Interesting.
Like and I mean, you can kind of like that does seem to be kind of like who they gravitate towards in the U.S. context. Like it seems to be like people in the Trump orbit,
the
or
MAGA world,
kind of,
I will say though that like there does seem to be. I don't know if this is sort of like a course correction on the part of AllatRa, but they're like extreme. Just in the last like year or so, or maybe year and a half, they're like very hardcore, like pro-Ukraine now, and they've sort of they've modulated their conspiracy theories to kind of put Russia and Putin at the center of being like the bad guys that are trying to take them down, and they're actually like the heart of the anti-cult movement, which I know like contrasts with this earlier literature, like from the 2000s. That people are still like suspicious of them before, but like at the first, there were two events, I think in the United States in January and February at the U.S. Capitol. The first one was called United in Liberty, the Rise of Spiritual Diplomats, and was attended by MAGA politicians and European far-right figures such as Romanian MP George Simeon, a Trump fan who lost the presidential election in 2025. The U.S. president himself even recorded a video address for the conference in which he celebrated Pastor Burns' endeavors. Yeah, Trump said, "I just want to congratulate and thank Pastor Mark Burns. He's been my friend for a long time, and he's been with me from the very beginning, and we very much appreciate him on the great job that he's done. So many people believe so strongly in him, so God bless you, Pastor Burns, and keep going forward." Burns appears to have brought up his previous work with AllatRa while at the European Parliament weeks later. AllatRa's summary of the European conference quotes the pastor as saying, "The global initiative Spiritual Diplomacy, which I have the privilege to chair, has recognized the nanoplastics issue as one of the key areas to work." Yeah, they hate like nanoplastics. They're all about that. Nanoplastics are not a left or right issue, not religious or secular. We believe this is a moral obligation to protect life, and blah, blah, blah. So 2 weeks after that event, they co-hosted another conference in the Capitol called Freedom Has a Name, and it's called Ukraine, which was attended by U.S. officials, pro-Ukraine activists, and Ukrainian legislators. AllatRa's embrace of Ukrainian freedom comes after Ukrainian officials accused its members of justifying Russia's war and promoting the Kremlin's desire for a union of Slavic peoples. A November 2023 police raid on their offices found guns, explosives, money, portraits of Putin, and MAGA hats. The following month, arrest warrants were issued against Igor Danilov and 5 other leaders on charges including high treason, with investigations against the individuals ongoing as of March 2026, according to a police document seen by Open Democracy. In February this year, a Ukrainian court of appeals ratified a lower court's ruling that there is not enough evidence to ban AllatRa, which is also being investigated by the Czech Police's Department of Extremism and Terrorism for alleged pro-Russian disinformation. Confusingly, AllatRa has also been banned by the Supreme Court in Russia for being extremist, with the prosecutor's office calling it an undesirable organization engaged in pseudo-religious and missionary work. So that is confusing. So Russia ended up following through with banning them. Ukraine, like on appeal, actually said you can't ban them, and now they're super pro Ukraine. Interesting,
Yeah.
right? You know, like
I
is
mean,
Ukraine
like,
that
makes
naive?
sense
If
being,
they are
like, U.S. lobbyists, like what are they gonna, you know?
Yeah, it just makes me think like if it's so obvious the way some of these people say that they're a Russian op, then why isn't Ukraine, which is under kind of like martial law these days, like why are they blocking them being banned and kicked out? You know, even though I guess I
Well,
don't
like
know if
I
the charges
said,
can drop.
I really think that the whole idea that they are pro-Russian is based on, I don't think that they were necessarily anti-Russian. I think that it seems to be that if you, like with many of these groups, if you like mess with AllatRa, then like you're the ultimate enemy, right?
You're
Like
an
they
SP,
will not
yeah.
forgive you if you like come after them, you know? And like, I think that, I mean, even though Ukraine, like the government did kind of come after them, I think that might be outweighed by the fact that like, that's a great sort of branding that they have in their role as like a U.S. lobbying organization. So, you know, they have a whole like part on their website called like legal status in Ukraine, where they like, you know, like address the issue. Yeah, so like, and they constantly are like saying like AllatRa supports Ukraine's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity within internationally recognized borders, and unequivocally condemns Russia's armed aggression against Ukraine, including war crimes, crimes against humanity, and the violation of international humanitarian law. And it mentions like, and we organize this conference, you know, and like just kind of lists all the like. There almost seems to be like, you know, there's a lot of like self explanation going on on this, or a lot of justification, but yeah, like so I think that once you like come after AllatRa, they will, yeah, so I feel like they weren't really anti-Russia, but the interpretation that they were pro-Russia is probably brought on by the fact that they simply are like kind of have like a pan-Slavic orientation and like sort of this strong like Slavic nationalism, right? And it like that might read as you know, and like, you know, like again in a Ukrainian context, like with, you know, the sort of and they're also like very sus and they're a cult, so like those things together, it's like you're you know,
they seem very fond of like doing entryism and like insight roles, so it's kind of hard to tell like when are they wearing a costume and when are they being serious. Like when they have a MAGA hat, to me that's like these people are insincere all the time. Like it's actually hard to tell, like, you know, like if they're being really like sincere about adopting one or another symbols that they think will kind of like draw people into them, or adopt this kind of like nice little NGO kind of identity, you know. They adopt a bunch of different faces and fronts to like extend their influence. So like it doesn't seem to me like like even if they're not really like I don't know if they're working for Putin, I don't know, like they might pretend to work for.
Yeah, my feeling is that they're like, you know, a splinter group of, you know, like one of the names that Marina Svung has taken on is like Victoria Preobrazhenskaya, like, you know, with the Ra capitalized. Like
wow.
Ra, like she definitely uses like the name Ra or the term like Ra. So I feel like they are like an offshoot of the White Brotherhood, and I think like their real politics don't really like care that much about like, you know, Ukraine or Russia necessarily. Like I think that they are like kind of ultimately relative to like a entirely different cosmology, an entirely different like sense of like the world, right, which kind of revolves around probably like
they're playing, you know, a bigger
Danilov
game.
and his like exactly, their plans are measured in, and well, not centuries, I guess, because they're 10 years. But I guess they, you know, their politics are measured in aeons. They're concerned about like Phaeton and stuff like that, you know, like, and like I think that the connection with Russian intelligence might be there in the sense of in the case of the White Brotherhood. Maybe that's a popular theory in Russia, but and in Ukraine, but the idea like is that in both, right? Like but I feel like that is sort of a common belief about like any cult, that like they're actually an intelligence agency op, right? Like in any country, like if there's a big cult in America, like people probably believe, I mean, again, I don't know, maybe we'll do an episode on this, like the Heaven's Gate was like an intelligence community op or something like that, right? Like,
I'm sure there's people that do think it's right. At least downstream from some like weird MK Ultra type shit.
Right, yeah. And that's what I'm saying, is that like it might be downstream from some weird shit. You definitely can see like the interest in some of that stuff. And like, I mean, yeah, let me bring up the sensei of Shambhala and like actually read some of this stuff. This is about the Soviet Union and like the space program and stuff, because you can kind of see like a little bit of the politics here. Yeah. This is pretty good. I'm trying to figure out where to start. Okay, so after World War One, Samuel Prescott Bush occupied the position of the first president of the National Association of Manufacturers and an economic advisor to the U.S. President Herbert Hoover. And not occasionally during these years, 1929 to 1933, there was artificially arranged a strong economic crisis called in the USA the Great Depression. Father-in-law of Prescott Bush, George Herbert Walker, was a big financier who founded in New York the very company Brown Brothers Harriman.
Oh my God.
He sponsored also the election campaign of another representative of the Freemasons who changed Herbert Hoover at the post of the USA president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a representative of the family of landowner and influential businessmen who had good connections in political circles. Yes, both Prescott and George Bush were active members of the order Skull and Bones. No. Skull and Bones? Well, they were real pirates, grinned Stas. Right, of the Arconic Sea, added Eugene.
My God.
So,
all right, now we're cooking at least a little bit.
During the World War II, when journalists got at the roots of the facts who sponsored the Nazis against whom the USA fought, there began a court examination during which arose the names of Harriman and Prescott Bush, but soon this question was hushed up. By the way, not without participation in the case of Allen Dulles, who was an attorney of Prescott Bush. Allen Dulles? Villager got surprised. Director of CIA? He became a director a little bit later, after the war. And during that time, he was a co-owner of the Law Bureau in New York, which belonged to his brother, John Foster Dulles. This law bureau represented the interests of one of the biggest Nazi sponsors, oil company Standard Oil, which belonged to Rockefeller. No. In the same 1942, for corresponding merits, Allen Dulles was appointed a head of the European Department of the new U.S. Office of Strategic Services. Due to his new authorities on the request of the Freemasons, he extends his contracts with Himmler, who was appointed already the next year to the position of Minister for Internal Affairs of Nazi Germany, establishes the renewed secret operation with SS institutions. And in 1953, Allen Dulles became a director of CIA. Anecdote, grinned Victor. That's true. They changed the signboards, but the main players remain the same. Yes, Allen Dulles is a serious player. No wonder. He originates from the family of players, so to say preliminary half-finished material for chess pieces of the Archons. Grandfather of Allen Dulles was State Secretary of the 23rd U.S. President, Benjamin Harrison. By the way, the grandson of the 9th U.S. President, so to say, the last President National of Great Britain, whose father was one of those who signed the Declaration of Independence. Uncle of Allen Dulles, Robert Lansing, served in the same position under the 28th U.S. President, Thomas Woodrow Wilson, under whose governance the USA entered the World War I.
It's true. It is true. I like that they're doing the WASP genealogy. I love it.
Yeah. And who was one of the initiators of the foundation of the League of Nations. It's not to mention the elder brother of Allen Dulles, John Foster Dulles. John Foster Dulles, who occupied influential posts in the USA, including the post of Secretary of State under President Eisenhower, was also one of the significant figures of the organization of the Freemasons. By the way, he was as well a trustee of the Rockefeller Foundation. This man did a lot to realize the plans of the Archons concerning the World War II, and in particular the after-war world order and disposition of forces in it, took part in the UN Foundation. He composed the UN Charter, military blocs like NATO, ANZUS, and SEATO in order to oppose Russia, or to be more precise, the USSR. Not occasionally, there was published his famous essay, The 6 Pillars of Peace. 6? Again 6? Eugene burst out laughing. Right, pillars. To be more precise, supports of the Archons, nodded Stas. Well, Sensei, drawled Nikolai Andreevich, which each minute your story you impress me more and more. Me? Smiled Sensei. I'm just telling the truth, and I tell history as it is. Well, uttered Volodya, the truth always impresses. That's true that nothing changed in this world. There ain't nothing new under the sun. Unfortunately, added Sensei, well, let's come back to the year of 1924. Thus, the plan by the Archon's events of 1924 touched not only the political changes in some countries of Europe, but also the correction of political course of the government in the Soviet Union. What do you mean, the correction of the political course? Stas didn't get it. Have I understood in the right way? Was it in the Soviet Union? Yes. The thing is that the second revolution in Russia, I mean the Great October Socialist Revolution, arranged by Lenin's team after the destruction of the Russian Empire by Kerensky, was also financed by the Archons. Please pay your attention to the very process of this Archon's game, how it has been occurring. When the February bourgeois revolution in Russia began, Lenin and many of his companions were at that time in emigration in neutral Switzerland. For them, this bourgeois revolution was unexpected news. But when they hurried up to leave for Russia, the authorities of Germany, Austria, and Great Britain altogether refused to allow Lenin and his team to pass through their countries and block them in Switzerland with the help of European countries supporting this decision. Only in April, all these countries gave the same unexpected permit for transit of Lenin and his team through the European countries to Russia. It emphasizes once again how the Archons manipulated with people in their game and moved them like pieces to new positions at a certain time and in a certain place. When Lenin came to power, the Archons rounded him, of course, with their people for control. However, Lenin wasn't a simple man. He had his own high-principled team headed by Felix Dzerzhinsky, who understood clearly the whole game of the Archons.
the Cheka commander, yeah.
I think
That's
at
funny.
some point he says, the NKVD has saved the world several times, from the Archons. Coming to power,
folks. Okay, I can kind of see the appeal of it now.
Yeah, coming to power, Lenin and his group began intensively to look for contact with Shambhala in order to get rid of the power of the Archons. Do you want to say that he played a double game? Asked Nikolai Andreevich. Right you are. Lenin made the attempt to lead the country out of the crises, and when clear goals opposing the intentions of the Archons started to be obvious through the concrete actions, the Archons decided to get rid of him and to replace him with their puppet. Starting already from 1922, referring to Lenin's bad state of health, he was de facto dismissed from governing the country by nomination of Stalin. Despite the fact that the old Lenin's team did its best to fight with this Georgian and Jewish mafia, as they understood, which threatens what the threats it would bring to the country. After Lenin's death, January, I'm trying to navigate this and to translate this kind of on the fly or rephrase After Lenin's death, January 21st, 1924, already in 4 months during the 13th Congress of Workers' and Peasants' Party, Stalin was elected to the post of Secretary General, and this occurred despite the written will by Lenin in no way to nominate Stalin to this post. And in fact, those who supported Stalin later paid with their lives. After Lenin's death and Stalin's nomination, almost immediately some countries, including Great Britain, France, Italy, recognized the USR and established diplomatic relations with it. As you understand, it also happened not suddenly. I should mention that Stalin wasn't glad with illusion of his power for long when he finally understood that he got under the Archon's thumb, but I will tell about it a bit later. So let's come back to 1924 in Germany. By this year, Freemasons did so that the name of Hitler was heard not only all around the country but also abroad. Since despite the fact that the ideological potential of Hitler's party gushed forth, this party existed only in Bavaria, or to be more precise, in Munich. Beyond this place, few people knew about it. In order to eliminate this weak spot and to make their puppet Hitler famous all around, they provoked on November 8th, 1923, the so-called beer hall push. The beer hall push? Does it mean that they were troubled with wind because of beer? Uttered Eugene, hardly restrained from laughing. I kind of what's going on with Eugene? If I were Sensei, I would be like, I feel like, but Sensei's smiling benevolently at them. I guess, he is a patient man, because I don't like how Eugene is constantly bursting out laughing. He's unveiling all the plots of the Archons. Anyway, the historians called it so, as it is believed that the decision about launching the national revolution to which Hitler called to in the form of a crusade to Berlin in order to overthrow Jewish and Marxist traitors was taken in one of the Munich pubs where the main action of the political play of the push took place. Volodya grinned and said in a bass voice, "Right. In fact, such decisions with big investments aren't made offhand. Money likes sober minds." That's true, Sensei agreed with him. So next day after this event, Hitler arranged a demonstration for show, and together with other party leaders, headed a column of Nazis, which moved to the center of the city. Boba explains the beer hall push, but it was all a show. The Freemasons of high ranks, as well as with the Tibetan monk who received in the West a nickname, the man with green gloves, who was in fact not a monk, and the last person in the structure of the occult secret order of the Green Dragon. That was Karl Haushofer, who was married to Martha Meyer Doss, daughter of a Jewish lawyer. The cover belongs to the noble aristocracy. Anyway, he became the Green Dragon, and I guess he was, evil, and not even conducts can be compared with these creatures. The conducts? Who are they? Asked Andrew. I will tell you someday later. I can't wait to find out. So then there's the evil Green Dragon Order. It's members of the right hand of Ar-Rahman. They want to set up a new world order. It goes on and on, but he talks about Shambhala, and eventually he gets to the Soviet space program.
Okay, he loves that.
What were you gonna say? Sorry.
Does he think the Freemasons, the Archons, were behind the downfall of the Soviet Union?
I think he definitely does. In fact, even Stalin, he was kind of under the thumb of the Archons, but he kind of realized that the reason why he had the Iron Curtain was to try to protect himself from the Archons, but they liquidated the main military elite of the state, which had combat experience in previous years, so the Archons I guess benefited from that. So they were orchestrating World War II quite a lot. Wewelsburg Castle comes up because they had the Grail, which also factors into all of this.
Interesting.
Ancient symbols were not only known to ancient Scandinavians and Germans, they were also known to Slavs, Celts, Samardians, Scythians. They were known in Central Asia. Runes are very important. Hitler was going to join forces with Stalin against the Archons. Okay. One can't say the Archons didn't know that. Of course they knew it and used it in their interests. When the time came, they just pressed Hitler through the man with green gloves and forced him to unleash war against the Soviet Union. What? Why was he frightened before them, uttered Victor, with such plans and such ambitions? Right, he let them push him around like a fool. The guys laughed, and Sensei explained, because self likes itself best. That's why he went where they pushed him, in order to give an impetus not on the revolution, but evolution, as the Archons used to say. So the Soviet Union won this war, and it became a total surprise for Hitler, though for the Archons it was a predictable result. Irrespective of the winner in that war, the Archons anyway gained expansion of their influence on the countries which participated in the war, and their people from the Freemasons benefited materially from sales of weapons and provisions to parties at war, and from following issuance of after-war international credits. If to regard globally who was punished by the judges of the Freemasons for numerous victims of the World War II, it becomes clear that the sentence are just the public puppets of Nazism, or of secondary importance, people who knew about the real leaders and their doings. But the valuable people to the Archons, blah, 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 there was Paperclip, etc. Yeah, so so the USA, with all the current technologies, it's possible to turn the Sahara Desert into a booming garden. But
another interesting climate take.
Yeah, they need to create scarcity so the U.S. can fight for democracy, which is all pretense, so that the Archons can, create civil unrest and discontent. In order to convince people that nuclear war is necessary, they will manipulate the economy of the United States. The Archons always do that. At first, the country's economy is artificially boosted. People get used to living good. Then they get a foreign enemy of the country. At this time, the Archons provide acute economic recession. A serious economic slump is set. As a result, many people lose their jobs. Public opinion becomes quite unfriendly. They start psychologically preparing the people for the necessity of being first to use a nuclear weapon. It is quick and it will efficiently punish the undemocratic country, because of which all become poorer. Thus, the Archons will attempt to launch a global war, where obviously very many people will die, including those who thirst for retribution. The Archons expect that in case they were successful in ideological domination of the world and becoming the single dictator in a form of the world government, then after this global war, they will rule over the world entirely, and their one world government would finally be established over the whole world. And of all the remaining people on the earth, them having the fee simple, I don't know what that means. The fee simple, they would cultivate a servile psychology, but they're leading the world to World War III.
Naturally.
But Sensei says, let me explain. Those Archons are a pitiful handful of people compared to the whole humanity. People spit on them, they would sink in the spittle. The Archons are only planning, while it is for us, people, to decide whether to agree with their choice or to stand up for our own. The collective choice depends entirely on a personal choice of every individual based on internal outweigh of either spiritual desires or animal deceit. Why did the Archons drive us on war, revolutions, internal discords, and we follow like a flock of sheep and kill our own kind, not even thinking about the consequences? Because the Archons are interested in shaping a people incapable of independent thinking, search of regular occurrences and action. They are interested in slaves who can be manipulated. A man is always free in his personal choice. You need to be a human. Then he talks about how the moon landing was fake.
Naturally.
Werner von Braun's involvement in that, kind of just like your standard conspiracy stuff. But
I did want to bring up, because when you go on the AllatRa TV website, like they're interviewing quite a number of people, and most of whom I feel like I haven't heard of, but I was kind of I was interested in this one guy who's billed as like a former CIA official. He's one of these former CIA. It's like they have their own John Kiriakou to come by and talk with them. And this is a guy named Glenn Korn. And, unlike Chalakian, and maybe some of the other people floating around, this guy does indeed seem to have like a multi-decade career as a CIA officer and station chief, primarily in like Central Asia, like probably Turkey, Central Asia, and Russia, going through maybe the 1990s. But he only retired in 2023, and he has a whole interview about like the Russia and Ukraine conflict and stuff, and he is a very like pro-Ukraine, pro-NATO kind of vibe, and like condemns Russia, etc. But he is on the board of like what is it called? The Institute of World Politics Graduate School. I forget if this might be a standalone institution. I looked into this place. I was like, oh, what is this? I think he might be he's an adjunct professor here, but it's kind of like the main thing he's affiliated with now. This is like in Washington, D.C., but just interestingly, I looked it up. It's in DuPont Circle, yeah. And it has like, it confers graduate degrees in various like national security. Let me see what their programs are: statecraft and strategy, strategic intelligence studies, counterintelligence studies, cyber statecraft, etc. I thought this is a little interesting. This institute holds the private library of former CIA Director William Casey and the American Security Council Foundation Library, which is like, damn, like the American Security Council from Chicago, which compiled like blacklist information and all kinds of like suspicious like private intelligence information about the American left, sponsored by big shot industrialists. But like this institute has inherited the entire library of the ASC, and then you got this guy working there, and I think he also works at like the Antonin Scalia School at like George Mason University as well. Oh yeah, the National Security Institute at George Mason University's Antonin Scalia Law School. He is a visiting fellow there, and 34 years in the U.S. intelligence, defense, and foreign affairs communities. He served as chief of station in 4 overseas critical assignments and held key senior leadership roles at CIA headquarters. He is the CEO of Great South Bay and an adjunct professor at Institute of World Politics. Yeah, so he wrote his latest article. He writes for the Cipher Brief also. He wrote an article in July called "Russia's $11 billion soft power gamble," where he's kind of like criticizing. He's like talking about the last time he was in Russia and how Russia has squandered everything because they invaded Ukraine and they suck, and blah blah blah. But like this guy is not like a total fraud and a nobody, but he's linking up with the AllatRa people. And I do wonder, AllatRa is also linking up with people that have connections to Michael Flynn, and I do wonder about like that faction of kind of like the military right wing that is very hardline, like religious, but also weirdly theosophical at the same time. This group that kind of backed Trump pretty early, that some of whom were involved in like QAnon stuff and like sophisticated psyops.
Yeah, and esoteric Christianity. Like, that's the thing about AllatRa is like, yes, it's pagan, but it's also like very, it definitely has like Christianity plays Christian symbolism plays like a big role in it, their symbol is like the cross, right, on top of the moon, I guess, kind of like symbolizing the masculine, feminine. I imagine that might be.
I thought it was the figure 8 inside of a triangle inside of a circle.
That might be their new
circle.
symbol.
Yeah,
they might have a new symbol that looks like that.
Maybe it's the Creative Society symbol.
No, you kind of. Now it's kind of like a crescent and a moon looking at their website, but
but they're like a lot of those kind of like new age theosophy style groups, like they're not or something like the I Am activity, like it's not hostile to Christianity per se. It just tends to kind of like put Jesus alongside like a bunch of other ascended masters and is kind of like one path to wisdom, but not the exclusive one. That's definitely like more like the love and light approach than an explicit like we want to scrawl runes and do like spooky kind of like reject the Christian tradition, like or invert it or something like that.
Jesus
it's very
like
syncretic.
Bodhisattva,
Exactly. So I don't know, like I could almost see them like floating above, like wanting to insinuate themselves on like whatever side of the Russia-Ukraine war kind of wins, or almost like really establish themselves in like the aftermath and the wreckage of the war. Like whenever it ends, they'll be right there to make some kind of move. I don't know.
Like I almost feel like they don't really care, like even if like they gain a following like anywhere. I almost feel like I think my read on it is that like any kind of like intelligence use, like the sort of theory that you hear about the Great White Brotherhood, or like that some floated that like the supposed leaders weren't really the leaders and they were just taking direct orders from the KGB. Like whether that is true or not, I think that's definitely not the case with AllatRa, like at this time. I don't think like
it doesn't strike me as super convincing at the moment that they, because it's like they're based in Atlanta, they're mostly Ukrainian, and granted they're from Donetsk, but like still they're like Ukrainians. Like most of the people I think working for them are Ukrainian, and like now they're very vocal about like they had like Pastor Mark Burns go on TV after, I think he was almost doing the kind of classic like the Trumpian kind of Ukraine's a loser kind of thing, but then he went on like this press junket trip to Ukraine, and he came back and he was like, I was wrong, like actually like Ukraine must be defended. It's like, damn, they got to him. Like they updated his script. We got to go all in on Ukraine now. But then like the kind of the big rabbi, like the sus rabbi kind of influence as well, which also Brock Pierce is. The Chabad people are very powerful in Ukraine and have all these ties to Israel, and it's kind of part of the bigger like Zionist program and networks that are like making moves right now. So I wonder. That's kind of where the power is at. If they're going for that like MAGA faction,
I think that
much
might
more
be
likely.
More like, that might be more like a function of the sort of MAGA aspect than something that is like a part of the kind of milieu they came out of. It might be something, but yeah, they like I'm saying or part of what I'm saying is that I feel like they might evolve in their new context. They might not even care at all about what happens in Russia or Ukraine. If they can establish themselves, if they can build an audience of, like, they create materials in English, right? Like, if they can create an audience of English speakers, if they can create, like, followers anywhere, I do think that, like, they're operating on the level of, like, they, for the membership and for the leader, Danilov, right? Like, their concerns are not, like, rooted in, like, sort of a vision of the world that is like corresponds to any kind of practical politics. Like maybe there's some kind of like politics to it, but like it is mostly about like growing the organization and like gaining power, and I think that people in the US like see it as like a relationship that can be cultivated, and that like it can be like a possibly an instrument of soft power, or like a connection worth cultivating, and like a group that can like be tolerated, right? There's a lot of groups like that like not to really compare them, but like Gulen, right? Like Turkey's like a US NATO ally, but Gulen, like, he lives here, like
despite
we just like
his
let him
dissident
exist.
status. We kind of protect him, it seems.
Right, totally.
Those complex relationships exist. The other thing I would throw out as a kind of complicator to the original Great White Brotherhood being solely some kind of like KGB op. I think I watched a Russian like a YouTuber like do a stream about the Great White Brotherhood, and it was like machine translated. But she said, I'd like to find a harder source, is that the Ukrainian Great White Brotherhood in the early 90s received money or like financial support from Aum Shinrikyo in Japan. Which is like, we talked a little bit about that group in a previous Q&A episode, but like they did the sarin gas attack on the Tokyo subway system, and I think there was something this woman also talked in her video about, there were a lot of like rumors of like the Great White Brotherhood cult like murdering people and like getting rid of the bodies and stuff, and they were never able to prove it. But a lot of like the parents of like teenagers that got sucked in by it were calling it total brainwashing, and like these people are very sinister, like taking over people's lives and making them like classic what we have here with a million different cults, but very like sophisticated and kind of like
self-immolation, even though it was thwarted. Right. It's very like dramatic. It's gonna leave an impression. Not at, like at least they didn't commit a terrorist attack like Shinrikyo did, but still
there might have been like plans or whatever, and even like when they were raided in 2023. I mean, granted, there's like a war going on, but they found like AKs and like a bunch of like a stockpile of like automatic weapons in their offices, as well as, did you see the video with like they had this like pyramid box in their headquarters that they had used for like, they had like press conferences with this thing where somebody would go and sit, and they were doing telepathy experiments with it. Like they'd have somebody in like the UK, I guess, in a similar box, and then somebody sit in this box, which is like electrified with a current somehow, and it was like had a weird reflective like mirror, and then they were gonna put them in the box and then get them to focus on certain images, and then like test in real time if the person in the other box could guess, like telepathically receive what it was. I didn't see what the end of result of that video was, but they were kind of showing off the triangle when they raided the property. It's like, it looks like kind of like an orgon accumulator or something like that. But very odd. I mean, they were kind of like openly boasting about doing these great experiments and kind of like SRI, like Uri Geller type shit. I guess like, probably like a few years ago, or a few years before they got like banned. But
They also, they mentioned again, like I could see something like this being like its importance being exaggerated because this is a popular book series, but they also apparently found the copies of that book Project Russia or books from the series Project Russia, which is apparently a big widely read Russian book series, very popular, like a bestseller.
Okay, so we're not exactly talking about the Turner Diaries, kind of underground. Only political radicals that love Butler would have this book, or something, right?
No, but it does have a it does have a certain political bent. I mean, this is one article about it. You could take with a grain of salt. A special edition of the first volume of Project Russia was originally distributed in the early fall of 2005. By the State Courier Service of the Russian Federation, referred to in English both as DFS and GFS Russia, via the special overnight courier mail reserved for the highest level of documents to all executive officers of the Kremlin, including the so-called Russia's white, Belbedom, the White House, I guess, the Russian Federation Council, the Prosecutor's General Office, the FSB, the Russian State Security Service, and the State Duma. No author was identified. Copies were also delivered to many well-known Russian public figures, including film director Nikita Mikhailov, winner of the Grand Prix X Iquo at Cannes in 1994. Though not yet on sale commercially, it nevertheless became one of the most discussed books in Russian political circles, included in the register of publications recommended for reading by government officials, as well as public and political figures by the office of the President of Russia. As such, from the very first, was accepted as an official ideology. A censored edition of the work was published a full year later, in 2006, soon followed by 3 additional volumes, and more recently by an omnibus edition, Project Russia, the complete collection, in 2014. These continue to be sold in vast numbers by Russia's largest publisher, Exmo. They have appeared on various bestseller lists in Russia, including Moscow Books, political book lists, as well as a nonfiction bestsellers list maintained by probooks.ru. According to Moscow Books, they have been read by more than 3 million people. It was only with the publication of the declassified 4th volume that any author of Project Russia was identified. Well-connected Russian billionaire Yuri Shalaganov. He was identified by the Russian press as its author in an article by Larissa Kaftan based on her interview with Shalaganov entitled "What Awaits Us After the Presidential Election in 2012," published on 1st October 2010 in Communist Truth. Yeah, and in the article, Shalaganov reminds his audience that all the possible authors among notable Russian political scientists and politicians have denied authorship. He adds, many came to conclude that its source must be the Kremlin. Of course, there is also the fact that the statement appears in an official Kremlin-generated journal, Communist Truth, which happens to be the official journal of Russia's Communist Youth Organization. Third, according to Shalaganov, this opinion was reinforced with a 2nd volume. Its release was timed to coincide with Putin's bid for a 3rd term, and it includes reflections of the need for constant power at the top. Throughout the interview, Shalaganov uses we, not I, to speak as the author and admits only one of the authors has been revealed, and the other, perhaps the major creators of the project, still prefer to remain anonymous. Thus, Shalaganov himself seems to be just one of the several authors. Indeed, throughout the above-mentioned 2nd volume of Project Russia, the series is discussed in terms of being the product of an inner circle of unnamed influential elites. The main thrust of Project Russia is its general disdain for democracy and its advocacy for a state led by a strong ruler, a new kind of czar. Shalaganov began his interview with, "If you take a poll today and ask what democracy is, many will say it is deception and delusion. 5 years ago, we had the illusion that democracy is possible. Achieve it and all would be well. Now, many people understand democracy. It is a utopia, a myth. In Project Russia, democracy is dismissed as a form of government that is possible only at the local level." Reading that, actually, it does kind of resonate with what you see in the Sensei books. They say the same thing, that it has to, government should be local, and, democracy, which is not untrue, but, democracy is maybe not true in these terms, but it is a, sort of a pretense a lot of the time, especially in terms of American imperial policy. But the, idea of a democracy is just a veil for archonic slavery, right?
Oh, right.
They talk about this, yeah. But according to Sheleganov, in Germany, Russia, and the United States, there is no democracy. The myth of democratic elections in these countries is a deliberate lie. Lecture 12 of Project Russia disparages the new form of government, democracy. According to Project Russia, American democracy is a sham. Centuries have passed, but the world is not one iota closer to the realization of this dream. Fair enough. The point is reiterated throughout the book. For example, Project Russia notes, when we are asked, and how about the United States, the citadel of democracy, we say, make no mistake, in all democracies, only the visible part of the government changes. The elected officials, the powers that define the overall direction, remain unchanged. They maintain continuity and heredity about the way it was in the USSR. The only difference is that the electoral spectacle in the United States is more carefully thought out.
Yeah.
The tenor of this quote is reflective of the overall text. Project Russia insists that it does not really matter which party wins the American presidential election. The candidates from both American parties do not differ from each other. All differences are first, of secondary importance, and second, laughable. Again, like reasonable critique. The U.S. is discussed as a country in which the real power is concentrated in the hands of an enduring elite class, exactly like the USSR. However, in drawing these parallels, the book conveniently fails to mention the former is a multi-party system, albeit with two controlling parties, and the latter was a dictatorship controlled by a single party. In the USSR until 1987, citizens voted directly for the candidates nominated by the Communist Party in unopposed elections. The phrase electoral spectacle cynically implies, of course, that American elections are carefully crafted bread and circuses shows delivered to the masses rather than the actual electoral process. I mean, they are. Indeed, Russian hackers apparently worked throughout the American 2016 presidential election campaigns to actively interfere with the electoral process and destroy American voter confidence. I mean, true, even if there is a decision between these two candidates, the process of selecting those candidates is not democratic, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, all fair enough. I feel like this is probably widely accepted.
Yeah.
Probably a lot of people in Russia feel this way about America.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of people in the United States anyway. But yeah, so it goes on to talk about, the Russia released, things to WikiLeaks, blah, blah, blah.
What year is this being said?
When was this written? Talking about this in 2018. So they're talking about, the leaks from Hillary Clinton's campaign about trying to sabotage Bernie and all this stuff,
Yeah.
So, the Russians try to exploit divisions with the American voters. Project Russia insists that Western thought is evil, leading to all manner of decadence. One particular target of Project Russia's authors are homosexuals. Homosexuality is cast as evil, allowed in democracies, which they will not be able to later eliminate. Viruses once released do not return freely to their cage. To truly understand why Putin is so opposed to homosexuals, however, it's necessary to know a little history. The Russian LGBT community were significant supporters of perestroika. The Moscow Gay and Lesbian Alliance staged demonstrations for gay rights in both Moscow and Leningrad in summer of 1991. They were followed almost immediately by the coup d'etat attempt known as the August Push by hardline members of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. The coup attempt was successfully thwarted in Moscow by an effective civil resistance campaign. The failed coup helped precipitate the total collapse of the Soviet Union a few months later in December 1991. The activists maintaining the barricades defending the Russian White House included many gays, and Yeltsin's decrees were printed on the Xerox machines of the Moscow Gay and Lesbian Alliance. I didn't know that.
Wow.
Meanwhile, Moscow was being, prevented from blah, blah. Tolerance for individual rights in Project Russia is recast as tolerance for any category of sin. It goes on.
They're doing the
typical, just kind of delineating Putinite
right.
ideology here.
I'm looking through more of their guests. They've had some interesting. They've had a few members of the Ukrainian government. They had Steny Hoyer come on AllatRa TV, which is kind of random, and Congressman Joe Wilson. That rabbi comes on like 4 or 5 times. Congressman Mark Harris on the Biblical Foundation of Governance. Oh, okay. They're really. Faith, Freedom, and the Rise of Spiritual Diplomacy. Yeah. I did also. There's a reconstruction thing that Dave Troy had posted about. That there was this like Ukraine reconstruction summit, I guess, that's been happening, which sounds like a big old opportunity to, make lots of money from Ukraine now that so much of it has been flattened. And this network shows here there's Laura Loomer with Rabbi Osman posing together. And then beyond that, I see Brock Pierce.
They invited
I believe.
Laura Loomer. That's funny.
Yeah, Laura Loomer is at the Central Synagogue of Ukraine. This Rabbi Osman is Chabad affiliated. Here we go. Here is Rabbi Osman and Brock Pierce wearing a cowboy hat, holding up some kind of like Torah plaque. Oh, this is actually at the Pierce School at the Penthouse, D.C. I guess it looks like Brock Pierce hosted a special post-inauguration brunch at his house. He lives in this like big loft space now where he's been throwing like parties ever since Trump came back into office. So I guess let's see. Oh, that's right. Remember the Pierce School that he was gonna like build?
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at this. You have Pastor Mark Burns, Rabbi Osman, and this big thing. Pierce School is being built here in the merit of rebuilding of Ukraine. It's kind of unclear if this is like this is in Ukraine. They've named a school after Brock Pierce, or if he's like submitted money to do it. Here's another one with Brock Pierce and Eric Adams, and Pastor Mark Burns hanging out together. Dave Troy feels like this is a nefarious. Let's see. There's an odious group, the Ukraine Reconstruction Summit Network, centered on Brock Pierce, Trump spiritual advisor Pastor Mark Burns, the AllatRa cult, Rabbi Moshe Osman, Yaakov Flichkin, and several others. This group has positioned themselves to profit from Ukraine post-war and held a major conference in Washington, D.C. last September. This is the same network of people who funded the Don Colossus gold statue of Trump at his Doral Club. Laura Loomer met with Rabbi Osman yesterday. Brock Pierce is building a replica of the school building in D.C. in Anatevka near Kiev with this group. Be very cautious when trying to assess motives and relationships when evaluating this network. It's not about victory for Ukraine. It's about accruing future power. I like that he has to like remind people not to just be like, yeah, Fafo, yeah, like, yeah, Slava Ukraine, and it's like, no, actually, these people are like really sus. Like, don't fall for it. But I guess, yeah, he feels like they. I remember the weird gold statue. I guess this group are the people that paid for it. He lists here the partners of Ukraine Reconstruction Summit 2025. We have Defense24.com, Open Source AI Foundation, Bitcoin Foundation, which Brock Pierce, I don't know if he still serves on it, but he did. And yeah, so I don't know. That's a little bit sketchy. You could see them grifting the night away in these different places. There was like this Czech kind of YouTuber that really got into it with the group. With AllatRa, I think Jakub Jal. I call them AllatRa's Czech op, and I guess like I don't know if they got involved with like lawsuits or something, but there was something about like Tanzania and like child trafficking. I didn't have enough time to like look into it.
They made up like a fake story to attack one of their opponents that like they were like trafficking children in Tanzania. They had like done work in Tanzania, but then like AllatRa made up like this conspiracy theory about like him being a child trafficker in Tanzania,
wow.
Like, and people like, it like went viral on TikTok because they like it, obviously that's like red meat.
Right. I did notice that kind of funnily. I wonder if this is around the same time on their like TV thing. They had an interview with a politician from Tanzania, like talking about like measures to protect children from like trafficking or something. I wonder. Yeah, His Excellency. His Excellency Ambassador Lazaro Nyalandu on protecting children in Tanzania and securing their future. He delivers a powerful address. He's an advisor to the president. of the Republic of Tanzania on diplomatic affairs. That was on February 19th of this year. I wonder if the whole purpose of this like video or address is to like smear the one guy that was like talking shit about them as a pedo. I guess it's pretty wild. Yeah. Yeah. Ukraine defends the world's freedom. Blah blah blah. But then they interview somebody who claims to be like a secret former like spy for the FSB, Alia Rosa, women's empowerment coach, public speaker, and philanthropist. She previously served as a secret agent with a Russian intelligence unit specializing in human and drug trafficking investigations. Since 2008, she has served as an ambassador for Best Beginnings charity, recognized by the British royal family, and was introduced to Queen Elizabeth II and King Charles III for her volunteer contributions. Like, it's just like these types of people. It's like, I don't even know what to believe about that. Like, you were an anti-human trafficking FSB agent who now works for a charity, a vague charity that is like honored by the Queen of England. Like, and she looks like a character out of like a John Wick movie, like a kind of ridiculously dressed, like femme fatale kind of like character where she's going to talk about spiritual diplomacy and human trafficking, and being a voice for the voiceless. Like oh my god, Albania becomes a quantum hub. How amazing. Yeah, like they're on some weird shit right now. It's like, I don't know, they're embedded both in like Trump world, but they seem to have done a much more emphatic kind of about face to being like loudly pro NATO and like pro Ukraine and other stuff, even though they have a bunch of conservative kind of often like Russia connected politicians like the Romanian guy singing their praises and collaborating with them at the same time. They might just be playing this like double game. Like,
well, like I said, like I feel like, like I mean, like I said way back in our first episode, like after this war started, like the resolution of it is gonna probably be something like that. Like there's gonna be like flipping, you know what I mean? Like there's gonna like people who like were so like anti, like you saw this in the Chechen situation, right? Like Kadyrov, right? He was like fiercely anti-Russia. Like he, was calling for like jihad against Russia until like the last breath, and now he's like the greatest supporter of Putin and Russia, right? And is fighting on their behalf. So, or his like people loyal to him are. So, like I think that is going to be involved in. Like it's going to be something where like if there's a resolution, certainly if there's a resolution in favor of Russia, it's going to be something where people can frame it as consistent with their support of Ukraine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like where like this is actually the true victory of Ukraine.
Right. Right. There's going to be, and I don't know,
is kind of compatible with the actually I wanted to read this part because this is kind of sort of attest to the possible connection with the White Brotherhood, because the cathedral where they were going to commit that mass immolation,
that pussy riot, mass suicide kind of stunt.
That was Saint Sophia's Cathedral, right? Which actually plays a role in the AllatRa book, which is presented as this series of conversations with Rigdon Japo. He kind of talks about the significance of this. Let me make sure that it's the right part. I know it's the part where he mentions UNESCO. Okay. So, if we take a look at modern Kiev, spelled Kiev, the first thing that catches the eye is a large number of trade centers, banks, and other similar institutions. One is richer than another. One gets the impression that everybody's obsessed only with trade instead of real spirituality creating deeds worthy of a civilized society. Rigdon replies, such large cities of the world are a vivid example of the prevailing human choice. But I repeat, to improve the situation is in the hands of people themselves. So even at that time, Agapit suggested to Yaroslav that he reinforce these western gates with a spiritual and cultural object that has a sign which would balance the invisible forces to avoid tilting towards the animal nature of the people who visit this place. So a church dedicated to the presentation of the Lord was built here. This was symbolic. Firstly, the old Slavic word, stetene, meant meeting. Or stretsene meant meeting. And according to the old Slavic beliefs, it meant a meeting of man with the divine and its glorification. Secondly, the biblical story of the presentation was dedicated to the Mother of God, Virgin Mary, who brought baby Christ to the temple on the 40th day following his birth. In Orthodoxy, the presentation was celebrated a week before February 25th, and the spiritual aspect was considered a renewal as a meeting of the old and the new. That is why it was very symbolic that the western gates in ancient Kiev were reinforced exactly with the spiritual and cultural object. If Sophia's cathedral was the center, the Golden Gate was traditionally the front essence. The Church of the Mother of God was the back essence, and the Western Gates was the right essence. Then the Lock Gates symbolized the left essence of the ancient capital of Kievan Rus. They were located at the place where today the city's central square is situated, the Independence Square, popularly known as Maidan.
No! Oh my, they were opening a portal, folks.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, when I had heard this information from you for the first time, I was extremely surprised. The capital's main square exactly to this place, deliberately emphasizing the left essence, because this place, as the capital square, gathers large crowds of people. Perfectly true. It was done not by accident. This is a Rigden answering her. It was done not by accident, but quite consciously, as I say, from the mind, the animal one. Well, first things first. The area where the Independence Square is located in Kiev today was called Peravishye, that which outweighs during the times of Agapit. There was a marsh there, and the people called it Goat Swamp since olden times. So then it is approximately there, in the southeastern part of the city, where nowadays Soevskaya Street begins on Maidan, leading to the cathedral. Yaroslav the Wise had the eastern gates placed there, which opened the way from Kiev to the Perchesk Monastery, currently the Kiev Perchersk Lavra, and also the Pesheneg's land. In history, these gates got the name Liadsky Gates. The word liad, when translated from the old Slavonic language, means unclean, unlucky, and liada means wasteland, weeds, thick bush, raw land. By the way, a few centuries later, after a long siege of the city, the armies of Batu Khan managed to break into Kiev exactly through the Liadsky Gates. Regarding the place itself, it remained a wasteland until the 19th century, when Freemasons, doing their bit to destroy the spiritual heritage of the Slavs, initiated construction of the city council building, particularly in this unclean place. Anastasia says, yeah, well, independence on Goat Swamp. To make the main square of such a city in such a place? Yes, Freemasons only look native to people, but they're alien in mind. Rigden. That's why they block nations' access to knowledge. They do everything to make people uninterested in their real spiritual history. They poison people with their lies, hiding obvious facts from them. Just look at their symbols. There are swords, bows, arrows, axes, shields, compasses, and lions everywhere. The Freemason symbols. If one just takes interest in history, one can trace an almost simultaneous destruction of even the smallest remnants of those iconic structures, which have been built for the people and activated with signs, for example, in Kievan Rus during the times of Agapit. For instance, the conservation restoration of St. Sophia's Cathedral in Kiev took place exactly in the 17th to 18th centuries, and it was surreptitiously rebuilt in Baroque style, which is why the building significantly changed its external appearance, including its geometric and spatial image. Well, the authors of historical literature diligently borrow one and the same phrase from each other, that Baroque in those days was a fashionable style of Renaissance and Western civilization. Rigden says, in Italy, Rome was its center. Does this tell you anything? Anastasia. Oh, it says a lot. Just take the word Baroque alone. Rigden. Indeed. The Italian word barocco is derived from the Portuguese perola barocca, meaning an imperfect pearl. In other words, a pearl with a flaw, a defect in a gem, a deformed pearl. The word is also present in the Latin language. Anastasia says, yes, taking into consideration the style was connected with aristocratic circles in the church, it isn't surprising that the word barocco was chosen for the name of the deformed pearl. Even more, later it was a dominant style in the European art up to the middle of the 18th century, especially in countries where Catholicism was prevalent. The Baroque is considered as a triumphal procession of the Western civilization. Well, yes, a torchlight procession. As they say, whoever has ears, let them hear. It will not be difficult for clever people to understand why Sophia's Cathedral became the first architectural monument on Ukraine's territory, which was entered into the Worldwide Heritage List of UNESCO, which means that rebuilding it, transferring it to a religious organization, or holding church service in it is prohibited, Anastasia says. That means that the Freemasons from the Archons rebuilt the original and now, using their own plausible tool, UNESCO, impose conditions on the local residents that the cathedral may not be rebuilt, and moreover, traditional Orthodox church services are not allowed in it. It's not allowed, so to say, to activate the pearl? Well, this cannot be called anything other than lawlessness, Rigdon replies. And this is, perhaps, the main spiritual pearl of Kievan Rus. And what have Freemasons done to other buildings in the same years? In the 18th century, they made attempts to rebuild Sophia's cathedral in Veliki Novgorod to distort the geometric and spatial image under the pretext of reinforcing the walls of the building. The cathedral in Polotsk has been rebuilt anew. Furthermore, by the 18th century, Sophia's cathedral in Polotsk was already significantly different from the original version. Given how many times this building was first destroyed and then restored from the human mind for centuries to come. Even then, despite the circumstance, Freemasons played it safe just in case and erected a church with non-Slavic architecture in the Baroque style in its place at the beginning of the 18th century. No.
So basically the cathedral is sus because it was built in a Baroque style by sus Archonic Freemasons.
Yeah, Freemasons, exactly.
So there's a continuity with them kind of targeting. I guess in their space, like they... Yeah, as the building itself.
They're fixated with that particular building, which they view as like a symbol of the greatness of Kievan Rus, but they believe that it was like defiled by the Freemasons. And then they also like prohibited religious services to even be observed in it. And they put it in a Baroque style to distance it from its Slavic origins, right?
No,
it's kind of the classic like Slavophile versus Westernizer thing. You know, even back to like Gogol in the, 19th century, like...
they're trying to keep the Slavic spirit down. They hate it. These Freemasons hate it. They can't.
The Archons they want to destroy it. But they also say this other thing that this is a part of this that reminded me a little bit of that description of Project Russia. Just to be fair to that argument. But the scheme of secret control works only as long as the majority of people do not know about it. Archons use every opportunity to place their signs and symbols on the territories in their control, so to say, their mold. What is more, this is all done quietly, with formal participation of peoples, quote unquote, in such discussions. The decision, as a rule, is made by a narrow circle of officials. Yet another story is invented for the general public, that precisely these symbols and signs are very significant for people living in the city or state from the point of view of history, philosophy, culture of this area. Furthermore, sometimes these matters involve scientists who are given the task of substantiating precisely such an opinion and no other. But what I want to say about it is this. If people themselves, regardless of someone's opinion, become interested in the history of their country and their people and in symbols and signs, if they expand their horizons in these matters as well, responsibly approaching the process of cognition from the perspective of the observer of the spiritual nature, it will be more difficult to deceive them. After all, we are talking about the land where they, their children, and grandchildren are to live. In other words, when people know the truth, at the local level they will put things in order themselves, for the main powers in the majority, in society itself, not in a bunch of priests and politicians' minions.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Theosophical anarchy, I guess.
Kind of.
All power to the Theosophical Soviets.
I guess. Or, everyone just kind of, nothing has changed in world politics. There's just more and more beautiful words. Gangs will be gangs, blah, 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 society, logos, fake elections. But, elections are bullshit. People, manipulate, etc. Democracy, and yet the Archons have sponsored the most free and democratic country in the world, etc.
It almost seems like a contradiction that, they seem to like America, but also it's completely controlled by the Archons,
Yeah, I feel like they can't, that's the thing, it's all about survival, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not and what benefits membership in the cult, you know what I mean? So they can adapt themselves to anything, this is written at a different time in the organization, right? Before they were cracked down upon.
Yeah.
So they can, but it is interesting how, you're kind of saying, one wonders like how can they like keep true, like what is, if anything, the core of this group? Do they have core beliefs, or is it simply about like the power of Danilov, right? Like, is it simply about
the
like
Mariana
his
Trench exploding? No.
Yeah, the Mariana Trench exploding. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just his charismatic kind of like a guru authority that kind of, you know, flitters between this issue and that issue, and everyone just has to chase after it. It's kind of unclear. They seem to have certain like obsessive issues, like the geothermal threat, and I think even something about how like the permafrost in like Siberia is melting, but like Russia's covering it up, and that has horrible implications for us. Yeah, I forgot if you clocked it, but just in case, did you mention earlier that that Maria Devi Christos, or Marina Zvigun, the woman leader of the Great White Brotherhood, she started like a new magazine in 2011 called Victoria Raw.
Yeah, she uses like I mentioned that she uses the last name that like has like I forget exactly what it is, but it has like RA in it, and like she styles it with the RA capitalized.
Yeah, capitalized. You know? Yeah. So I mean, that it's like I mean, I guess everyone in Theosophy
to be like
loves
a clear connection.
There's something there. Groups. Yeah, there's something there.
Like
folks.
The fixations are very similar. I mean, you know, you could compare it with like maybe but a lot of groups in the U.S. are fixated with a national mall or whatever. But I don't know. I feel like it. Yeah. But
But it's definitely a murky space that is kind of operating right now.
No,
on a
I
bunch
wonder
of
if
levels.
Yeah, because in terms of the books, like they do. I mean, they say like right here, like in Sensei of Shambhala, that like Russia, the Slavian people are the only threat to the Archons because they're unpredictable and they can't be. You know, the Archons can't predict the nature of the Slavian people. And when Russia was an influential country, it was a serious danger to the Archons. The Slavian generosity of soul can touch the minds of other peoples and awaken their souls, put to sleep by the sweet stories and promises of the Archons. But yeah, it seems like, you know, I guess, you know, you could still believe in that and believe that, like, you know, like Putin is bad and corrupt, you know. And that he's working for the Archons.
Exactly. I think this sounds like a malleable enough kind of theory where you can kind of say that, like this person is now under the control of the Archons when like they weren't before, and you can kind of just like
exactly.
flip side. Like actually, now that Trump's
Stalin
been reelected,
kind of with Lenin.
Exactly.
Yeah, the Archons thought they could use Lenin, and as soon as he started to really make moves against them, they killed him. You know. He was constantly trying to make contact with Shambhala to do something.
Yeah, the inscrutable Slavic mind. Yeah, no, it is. Yes. It is interestingly somewhat inscrutable.
You know what? I bet they have a take on Napoleon. I bet they do. Griffin asks, what's their take on Napoleon? I'm sure they have one.
Yeah.
I'm certain that one is forthcoming. Unfortunately, this book is so big that it like just like crashed, so I can't do a Control F for Napoleon. But like all these books are like 700 pages long, and there's multiple of them. I'm just gonna see if Napoleon is mentioned in part 4 here. Yep, he's mentioned multiple times. Napoleon was a puppet who was brought to power by the people of the Archons. So there's your answer.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
They calculated it all. The U.S. got the Spanish colony of Florida. It's the same archonic manipulations. You know, the Archons rewarded Napoleon with the title of emperor because he sold Louisiana.
Oh, wow. There's a New Orleans thing, right? You know?
Right.
Kind of
New Orleans might have been destroyed.
Yeah, it's very sad. But
the French Revolution does come up a lot. I think that was evil. It definitely was evil.
Right. The invasion of Russia, very traumatic. Yeah. So I think I don't know. I don't know what these fools are up to, but they're playing the game. I don't know what Brock Pierce just got hit with a lawsuit today. By the way, that was breaking news. But mostly for pump and dumping like investors on some kind of shitcoin startup that he had launched. So now he's kind of par for the course for Brock and his business ventures over the years. Yeah, but for some reason the Protos website really that they're locked in on Brock Pierce being sus. They wrote about him and his Epstein file appearances, and yeah, he's sussing out as all these these grifters are eaten right now.
Yeah,
it definitely is the feeling. Yeah, there's probably like all-time high for like sus conferences in DC sponsored by cults that like greedy people get invited to, But yeah, pretty not too many steps away from the actual White House, which is of course interesting.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll continue to hear more of them, and I like. It is crazy how like what a big footprint groups like this have. Like if as you said, I think it's really true that like they have like some kind of like financing, like they're getting money from like somebody, whether it is from like certain members, like who knows, right? Like who where are they getting this money from, right? But they certainly have like the resources to put together these things. Maybe it is like. I mean, obviously, a group like the Day Life Army, which you mentioned recently, they were able to like really exploit the membership to like make these things for free because the volunteers were true believers, So that might be a factor as well. But either way, like whether they just have the resource of people's devotion or they have the resource of wealth, they're going to be able to, make a big impact like in the media space, especially around like topics like. Kind of the things that are mentioned, especially around these kind of alternative narratives of history and things like this.
There's got to be money sloshing around somewhere in here for all these people. Like, what the fuck is Brock Pierce doing? Like, sitting down for an interview with this like Ukrainian lady, and he basically kind of like every topic that they like to promote about like universal basic income, like AI is going to be amazing, blah blah blah, like. Love and light, like it all comes up. It's like this is also like fake, like all these like media opportunity things that there has to be like everyone's getting something out of this weird performance of like, wow, these awesome people, just like with the Moonies, well, like they'd contribute to politicians, they had their newspaper, and I guess in this case they have this like they have demonstrated an ability to have a pretty sophisticated bot army that acts like a bunch of like stands that will flood into, it'll be interesting to see, like, will we get comments on this episode that are like, actually, like, I've been a member of, AllatRa since 2022, and I'm here to answer any questions you might have about, they're really not a cult. Like, that I've seen a lot of like threads where something like that, which may or may not be a real person, kind of come in and are like very weird and evasive, but they kind of like clog up the discourse, or I don't know if they do more aggressive things, like try to get things taken down and anything, any anti-cult activity, they attack like with a, kind of an organizational vigor that has like Scientology has, or, other kind of sketchy groups. So I don't know if like, do they have some like bot farm somewhere that is like hyper optimized? I think I read that they have their own like software that they developed to like manage sock puppet accounts and bots. Like somebody claimed
their own software.
Yeah, like they set up their own software that I guess does it very well. And so I don't know. You could see whether not like the Zionists have their own capabilities, definitely in that regard, but I don't know. It's like, are they loaning out their botting services to like other people that they kind of like hobnob with or get involved with? I don't know.
I mean, I feel like both of them are, probably not. Like, I feel like they have their, Israel's for all the hits they've taken, they probably have a more sophisticated public relations apparatus than AllatRa does. But they're both getting owned in terms of in the court of public opinion right now. So
that's true. That's true. Going to that national security conference in Israel in 2025 doesn't look so cool right now. Though I don't think they actually. That's a big like sign right there that they're they went to this conference where it's like the head of Mossad is like speaking, and they're like trying to take pictures with all of them, and like then talking about love and light. It's like it's kind of unsustainable a little bit. And now people are pissed at them because they've done this entryism thing about saying they're about climate change, especially like in Europe where people are, maybe politicians care more about that than here, but then it's actually about the Mariana Trench blowing up and blah, blah, blah. So, they might be kind of persecuted and marginalized yet again. But I guess maybe that's why they're jumping on the Trump train, because there's no shame maximum, of like being a sus, like sketchy grifter with like weird culty beliefs or anything like that. Like all freaks are welcome.
I mean, the very fact
Washington
that they like,
now.
the very fact that they're like holding like spiritual diplomacy thing with like rabbis, like, I mean, we didn't really read any of the parts of this that like really go in like hard on the Jews, but they certainly do. Like it's a very, very anti-Semitic book. So I would say like that shows like at least whether they are doing it to deceive or like to put to kind of in the same way that they emphasize so strongly that like we are not like banned in Ukraine, like we have always condemned Russians, like maybe it's sort of a like a sensitive thing where they're like trying to signal that they're not like this, but they
it seems to be pretty chill. It seems on the big issue, like defending Israel, like they're on side. So it's like, it's cool.
Yes, the sensei himself was definitely pro-Palestine.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting.
He makes a clear statement. He says, Nikolai Andreevich grinned and uttered, "Once I faced a quite interesting question. I was looking at one country in the Encyclopedia on States, and suddenly an information about Israel struck my eyes. Briefly saying, the historical article about this country and its lands begins from the fact that around 2000 BC, Abraham, the forefather of Jewish people, came to Palestine from Mesopotamia, and not a single word about Palestine. Just a small mark with a figure on the map of Israel, Palestinian territories. And that's all. I was surprised there was not even a slight mention about those who inhabited in Palestine before that. And as far as I know, that was one of the ancient states in that lands. What did you want?" Sensei shrugged his shoulders. "History for masses is unfortunately stuffed in most of its facts in the kitchen of world politics and is dished with decorations, so to say, in the form of generally accepted historical concepts."
Wow.
So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And,
so they seem to have shifted. Maybe they're chasing after power in the West. Maybe the two purported leaders of this movement from the shadows, Danilov.
Yeah. It's definitely There's a lot of particular stuff about Israel in particular here. And about the Israelites as well.
I didn't have time to check, but I also would be curious, since he's hiding out in Western Slovakia. Like there were those Epstein contacts with, I forget the Slovenian or the Slovakian politician that I think had to step down earlier this year about it, but he seems to be like protected by certain politicians in Slovakia, and I wonder if those are any of the same people that had like Bannon, Epstein, or Brock Pierce kind of like connections. Because I don't know what side they're on now.
They do an esoteric. Is this the Statue of Liberty that they're interpreting right now? Like, the Statue of Liberty. She's holding the Book of Laws in her left hand, and that is, I guess that's the Torah, actually. Yes.
Is this a painting they made?
No, the Statue of Liberty itself. The Statue of Liberty is holding. That's like how what she's actually holding. You think it's
like the actual thing that it's like
the statue.
In reality, they're holding the Torah
that's
because
the archons put that there.
Wow.
To show who really controls.
Oh my god.
The world, right? Just like the Star of David.
It's funny how the times have changed. You could just be like a Nazi, but also be.
But as we've talked about
okay.
before, like these people like are perfectly happy, like they don't really care like about whether someone like believes that like an evil cabal of Jews rules the world, like as long as it serves their whatever purposes they have,
Absolutely,
and especially like it seems like some of the people who like came to their spiritual diplomats conference are like some of it seems like a lot of the people who are there are kind of shisty characters on like sort of the same level of AllatRa, if not quite as esoteric,
right?
And maybe affiliated. Like I noticed that like there was a Muslim guy who was like in one of these like Naqshbandi, not all Naqshbandis are like this at all, but there's many like claimants to like the Naqshbandi lineage, and some of them are kind of like kooky. It definitely seemed like it's like one of those types.
They had an interview when they went to Israel. They seemed to talk to some like Dr. Sheikh, like maybe like Arab Israeli, I would have to assume, kind of guy, but like it seemed by the context of everybody else they're interviewing, it'd probably be like, they got some guy to say like peace and like we don't whatever, Israel's not so bad. I don't know. It's the general vibe of that conference. It's like a parade of grifters at this point. There's not really it's not really even that embarrassing in relative terms to have a group. Then again, this group was like throwing the entire conference, but the types of people that showed up to it, everyone's looking for their cut, their grift, so they can steal everything, as much as they can before, I don't know, the ship goes down or the Michael Flynn Civil War pops off. Like that might just be like a boomer fever dream that he has, but it's something to keep an eye on, right? Like in conjunction with all these other like worrying developments and the general like decline of America right now, that they wouldn't try to like whip up something, or they have their own domestic AllatRa or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. America is ripe for that type of thing. Like the American people are ready to receive it.
Right.
Honestly, like Tartaria, which is like almost an organic phenomenon, like is no less insane than any of this. I can we call it truly organic? Maybe not. Maybe it was some kind of a hop. But like either way, people definitely organically jumped on that and were all about it. And I think that it's actually arguably less insane than the
the mud flood Tartarian Empire, right?
And that
right.
old buildings in your neighborhood like were actually built by a civilization of giants that was like covered up by archons who had free energy, and that's why our architecture looks different now and all boxy instead of like classical.
They can't do that anymore. We don't have the giants to build that anymore.
Exactly. And all the mesas in like the American Southwest are actually giant trees that were chopped down by the giants. Yeah.
I love the mesas as tree trunk idea. It's a fun thing to think about.
Yeah, well, it's just like big. Yeah, well, Phaeton's mass was so big that those trees might have been planted from Phaetonic seeds.
Right. The
idea
that it was
probably every tree was that big.
The idea that it was 17 times bigger than Earth doesn't feel like astronomically like wouldn't the gravity be like different, or would they be giant? I feel like the mass of such a planet, they might be giants. Wow.
Yeah. Wow, that's what the band named itself after. They were thinking about Phaeton. They were thinking about what were the humanoids on Phaeton like. Yeah.
Rub it in their faces, folks.
Right.
Yeah, but all right. I guess we can leave the mystery for there now. I guess we'll keep an eye on this group and their antics. I'm sure we'll see a thing or two from them. As always, we'll keep her, a non-harassing eye on Mr. Brock and his antics. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, everybody. We will be back on Monday on patreon.com/subliminaljihad on the premium feed. But until then, dear listeners, stay vigilant.
Peace.